Dude,
what do you do?
No. This is a thing of I'm asking, when in reality it's like, well, I don't really agree.
No, you said target Fox News. Like,
what do you think I mean? Send the fucking liars that you can prove have lied to jail.
For what? Lying? What are you talking about?
For aiding and abetting a conspiracy against the United States of America knowingly.
This sounds a lot like MAGA right now, to be clear.
You know, I think every single member of this cabinet should be somehow, we need to figure out a way to arrest every single member of this cabinet. I don't know on what pretext you do it, but if you decide, if the decision has been made to do a thing, then you can pretextualize your way to anything. But I think every member of the cabinet should be arrested in jail. It's unbelievable to me. Hutch should be against you on that? Yeah, no shit.
Like, I feel like he is playing into the propaganda. He's trying to use the DOJ to go after his political enemies. How's that working out?
Well, he managed to get his attorney general to put a fake lawyer in to fabricate indictments against people, and he was able to do that. The judges worked as like a backstop, but this is almost like a Ben Shapiro tier argument of like the guardrails are holding.
You're talking about ignoring the Supreme Court, Jessiah. This is a really online, not serious thing, okay? Like, if you start advocating for why would it stop there? At that point, if you just ignore the court that blatantly, that kind of way, why would you stop there? And at that point,
Hutch,
you are Jessiah,
are you telling me there are no circumstances, under no circumstances, can the President of the United States or Congress disregard the Supreme Court? You can't think of any.
No, yes, but...
Then shut the fuck up! It's just a matter of where the line is wrong. So fuck your condescension, bro.
You invoked the Civil War.
Condescension.
Jessiah, you invoked the Civil War.
Fuck it. You're right. So there's a line, Hutch.
Yes,
so again, fuck your holier than thou shit.
No,
fuck it. You asked me for a specific example.
Hutch calls out DGG for not being lived out enough. Okay, Mr. Ultra Wide.
So like DGG is supposed to be like big old libs, right? You know, like big old fucking libs, right? I thought DGG was a bunch of big old fucking libs, right? I thought we were like, fuck the Tankies. Fuck the Tankies, these fucking LARPy motherfuckers. Fuck the Tankies. And then someone sends me a link to some of these fucking Reddit threads.
Uh-oh.
And apparently we're not doing fuck the Tankies. Apparently we're gonna do the Tankies. We're gonna do the Tankies. We're gonna be the Tankies. I guess that's the new thing that we're gonna do now. We're just gonna like unironically become fucking Tankies.
Uh-oh.
Maybe, I guess the Tankies were right all along. Is that what's going on? What the fuck is happening out there, guys? Jesus.
The posts he is referencing. Rashad is regarded here and made the same mistake Peaceco and Jessiah make whenever they have these debates. Stop accepting and playing into Hutch's framework. Obviously, if there are sympathetic elements within the system, and you have both the proof and evidence to fight the case, you should appeal verdicts you think are corrupt or maligned with the reality of law. If the Supreme Court behaves in a way that is tangibly bad faith or otherwise antithesis to a healthy democracy, then you should use all available legal avenues to rectify the situation. Rashad's problem is he's getting stun-locked by Hutch, calling him pro-dictatorship, and totally missing that he's essentially forcing himself to argue from the position that we ought to ignore all legal possibilities. At least from this clip, it just makes Hutch look more sane than him. 10 minutes. Oh, perfect for my emails. Yes!
What do conservatives usually have to, what bases do conservatives usually have to cover in order to win? They usually have to cover race, gender, cultural issues in order to win because they can't win on policy. So we have to take into account how do they usually win elections, and we have to shut off all of those avenues as best we can. Because the reality is that they don't need policy to win, but we do. Not even because honestly, we come to the game with policy and sometimes we lose. We lose, and we're not losing because the opposite side comes to the table with good ideas. Sometimes they get lucky, like you said. Sometimes unforeseen things happen. October 7th, the war in Ukraine, and Biden's a weak leader and he's asleep at the wheel. These things can happen. But what I like about conservatives is that excluding Trump's demonic, absolute satanic behavior, they're kind of ready for anything. They have their narrative, they have their message, they have their idea, and there are normies who think Kamala is an evil person because of her laugh. If you're underestimating that ability, that level of like influence mentally on the public, we're going to be, like you said, well, I don't know if it was IRI or you, but like this kind of like eternal back and forth with the right. And frankly, I don't think America can survive a back and forth with the right. I don't. Not forever. There's going to have to be an implosion at some point nationally. You can't possibly believe this kind of cultural back and forth, because that's really what it is going to last. Yeah, but like how long is that going to... Yeah, we had a civil war.
For the majority of the time it existed.
Exactly.
We have flourished up until this point. And we're also like forgetting the fact that, again, immigration's being used. Race is being used. We're forgetting the fact that there are demographic issues right now in America that are incensing a lot of voters to say this is the final fucking showdown. We don't want democracy. We want dictator, Lord and Savior Donald. And if you don't like it, shut the fuck up.
But that's what you sound like. You want a different dictator that's going to
I never said I wanted dictatorship. I never said that. No, I didn't. What I said was what I want is a strong Democratic Party that looks to completely overhaul American culture, not by forcing people to do things, but by heavily investing in education, going after institutions that seek to spread misinformation once this regime is toppled, going after companies that spread misinformation. I don't know, maybe Fox.
Hang on,
maybe hold on. Maybe hold on.
You said target institutions and corporations. Wait, what do you mean?
Fox News gets to sit there and lie about an election.
No, but what does that mean?
No.
What does it mean to target them?
In the name of democracy, we're gonna let them go free.
Well, what does that mean? We have a First Amendment, bro. What are you talking about?
You can't possibly believe that democracy can survive if a company can lie about elections. And your response is,
I'm asking you,
dude,
what do you do?
No. This is a thing of I'm asking, when in reality it's like, well, I don't really agree.
No, you said target Fox News. Like,
what do you think I mean? Send the fucking liars that you can prove have lied to jail.
For what? Lying? What are you talking about?
For aiding and abetting a conspiracy against the United States of America knowingly.
This sounds a lot like MAGA right now, to be clear.
You want to know what's funny? You want to know what's funny? Is like, this is part of the reason why we're stuck like this. Is a significant amount of Americans sit there and look at the other side that wants them to die and thinks, I love you. Meanwhile, they want to kill you. You will look at someone like Donald Trump and say, I don't know if we should lock him up. In the name of democracy, give him a chance. And then he gets in and says, no. Then he gets in and says, what's democracy? Can you eat that? I don't eat that. Donald Trump gets in and says, fuck democracy. This is the problem, is people like yourself who think we can hold hands with a side of the country that doesn't want to hold hands.
You want to get rid of, you want to abandon liberalism. You want a new kind of paradigm.
Okay, you can't honestly possibly believe that liberalism can survive if a company says, we have good reason to believe this is false. We've spoken to his private lawyers who have come to us with information that we know didn't come from the DOJ, didn't come from the FBI. Many of us are connected to this administration. We know this is really a lie, but because we're afraid of losing money as a result of lying about this, we're going to compel Americans to believe elections don't work and aren't real so that we can keep making money. And you, the ever liberalism loving guy, is going to sit there and say, in the name of democracy, whoever dies as a result of this, whoever goes to prison as a result of this, whoever suffers as a result of this, it's A-OK in the name of liberalism?
Well,
you think historians will look back on this and say, well, at least they stood up in the name of liberalism?
I'm just asking you, because it sounds like you're saying that liberalism is inadequate to deal with the threat of MAGA, right?
Liberalism is not inadequate up to the point of realizing that, hey, there will be people who say we don't like liberalism. And if your idea is we're going to let them run rampant and literally obstruct the system, conspire against the United States, conspire against the right to vote, literally spread mass, not just misinformation for the sake of it, but misinformation in accessory to not an accessory, I'm not a fucking lawyer, but in furtherance of a criminal conspiracy.
It's not against the law to lie. You can lie. You can lie about these things.
You can lie, but if it's
it can be. But I want to get some clarity. So, it can be. I think, unfortunately, Rashad, a lot of the theories of criminality of the administration are going to run into probably mass pardons, but also some substantive issues in terms of the conspiracy front, which the court will almost certainly intervene to prevent. That is, the Supreme Court. I want to get clarity though on the question that I don't think we should try though, Rashad. No. I think that there can be other methods by which we can try to have accountability. Unfortunately, though, and that includes, I think, a lot of state actors stepping up. For example, trying to charge kidnapping for some of these immigration matters where people were taken from states and brought to, like, for example, SCOTUS. I think that there's some creative stuff that we can try to do, but there's a big problem here and a lot of structural reform that's needed because we do need punishment and we do need accountability. But I just want to get clarity on Hutch's question. When you asked, is liberalism enough? Hutch, do you mean it to stop Trump and MAGA as a structural framework or as a set of ideas enough to defeat MAGA? Or is your question more, is it impossible to defeat MAGA within a liberal framework? What is more accurate to your question?
Can liberalism survive by adhering to principles like free speech. I mean, we don't throw people in jail for lying about politics. We don't. And Rashad conjured
just
something.
lying about politics, Hutch.
No, come on.
Some lies are illegal, right?
Yeah,
But you
of
acknowledge
course.
that it's possible to lie in an illegal way,
Why
right?
do you
Some lies
do
are crimes.
No, Soy Pill, why do you do this?
Because
Why do you
I
do
think
this?
you're strawmanning him right now. He's not saying
No. He's not. He's not straw manning. He's not straw manning.
Oh, he's not?
Hang on.
No. Hold on. He's not straw manning.
He was talking to me. He said use the state to target Fox News. I said for what? He said lying. I said lying's not illegal. He said aiding and abetting a conspiracy.
Lying to the point of causing an insurrection.
You think I'm mad at them for like lying about the
Soy
weather?
Pill, why are you doing
about?
this? You are smarter than this.
No, wait.
He's not. Okay, go ahead. No, Rashad, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You are straw manning me. Actually, my lawyer Soy Pill is actually right. That wasn't racial. But the point here is I don't. The fact that you're like, well, are you against lying? And it's like, well, yeah, in the furtherance of a criminal conspiracy. But what about the lying, though? I'm not mad about Jesse Waters saying that pancakes are better than waffles, which is a heretical lie.
But we already have mechanisms. We already have mechanisms to hold Fox News accountable for lies. I mean, they said it was the largest but this is a civil case. There was the largest civil settlement literally ever because they got
you think that this stuff should just stay like civil. There should be no actual criminal consequences for knowingly aiding and abetting in a criminal conspiracy that cannot work without a national mandate.
Of course. Like Jack Smith charged people with conspiracy to deprive rights. I mean, like,
but you do understand that, like, the conspiracy of this nature can't work unless like millions believe that the election was.
So you want to use the state to target Fox News, correct?
Yes, in the event, you know what's funny is like we're heading towards hell because of this kind of mindset. The Europeans understand that if you just let anything fly, you're cooked. But you guys are in this kind of mindset of like, well, everything will turn out a-okay and liberalism, and it's like liberalism reserves the right to defend itself. Frankly, if you're gonna sit there and let
illiberal though, I mean, like, if we're talking about
I'm being illiberal by seeing people engage in a criminal conspiracy that is reliant upon lies.
What Fox News conspiracy criminal thing are you talking about? What are you talking about?
I'm curious right now.
Yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, what
so wait, hold on a minute.
What's the criminal conspiracy?
So
that's a fair question.
Wait, hold on. You don't think that Donald Trump's criminal conspiracy is
I'm
not reliant? Hold on, because now
what
we're talking.
What is the crime? Is the question?
Hold on a minute. Hold on. I grant that we don't have laws on the books, but I do believe that we do need laws against this, because the reality is that this kind of conspiracy, cannot work without Fox. It doesn't. You need people to think it was stolen for them to run into the Capitol and obstruct a legal proceeding that actually transitions power from one head of state to another. So when you sit there and say, it's like, well, if
let's talk about that
power and we don't criminalize this, are we just going to recycle this?
Let's talk about that, Rashad. Let's talk about it because I agree that there's some. So the standard for criminalizing conduct with respect to the attempted theft of the election with the insurrection, all that, is incitement and conspiracy. You're right. Conspiracy against rights, a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. These are all things where statements can be relevant to those crimes. 100% about that. I don't think that Fox, however, has crossed the threshold in terms of the criminal conspiracy. If there were evidence of that, I think that they should be charged and they should be found out. There's another problem, though, in the context of actualizing this specific desire in the future, which is Trump has pardoned everyone there other than himself, and that is how are we gonna get accountability for Fox on Jan 6 given everyone's immunization when it comes to federal
it's political theory and philosophical theory at that point. It's like, okay, well, like, do we have a mandate? Does Trump do enough damage to where people say his pardon is fucking invalid? At what point does a pardon retain its validity if the person who instituted them did them to actually like aid and abet in the destruction of democracy? Like, at what point do we say a pardon really doesn't fucking matter?
Here's what I'll give you. Here's what I give you. This is what I'll give you, Rashad. I think that people should try different test cases. I'm telling you what the chances are that they'll be successful. 0.00001. This is what I would like to see tried. I would like to see Congress implement enforcement of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and for someone to try to get an action that would declare Trump having never held the office of presidency in his second term because he's unqualified under the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and maybe we can get get those pardons annulled by virtue of the fact that he was never in office
Oh, Pisco's coming over. Okay.
officially with respect to his qualifications. However, the problem is this is all going to fail in court because we're going to have a situation where there's a de facto officer doctrine where the courts are going to say, no, even if we were to grant that he were not in office legitimately, the Supreme Court's going to say he acted as a de facto officer. And so
which
really
Supreme Court? This current one?
Confrontation. This current one. So what I'm trying to say is we need this current Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk me through those problems. Go through that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but from a very layman perspective and, ignorant perspective, at what point do we even listen to the Supreme Court that gave the fucker immunity? And now, of course, legally speaking, it's not like literal immunity, but think about how Trump perceives it and how the public perceives it. Think about how a court that says, well, a president that speaks to his attorney general is within the rights of the power of the president, and you can't actually investigate whether or not his conversations with his attorney general are criminal in nature. Like, at what point do you say this Supreme Court is fucking invalid?
Wait, so if this is how you feel, Rashad, why are you not just actively agitating for a revolution, just a violent revolution right now?
Why? That's dumb.
Why?
Not right. I mean, you need a mandate. You need the public to want that. You need time to pass. Like, you can't just sit there and say, well, let's go fucking crazy. You do have to wait, because the reality is, if Trump, passes now, God forbid, and he's replaced by someone more sane and tame, all of those things will be impossible because the public won't feel like they need to happen. But the reality is, these things in their worst form do lead up to actually what they are leading up to.
Okay, but
dictatorship.
It does sound like you're pushing to just end the current system, scrap the Constitution, start something new. What is that?
No, we can amend and change things. There's no need to
but you just said ignore the courts. That's not amending. You're just at
what point do you acknowledge the fact that a court, the highest court in the land, is compromised by an organization like the Heritage Foundation?
Right, that would be getting rid of the Constitution, right?
At some point, the emergencies would have to require you to actually realize that, hey, the Constitution, under normal circumstances, we could not do this or we could not do that, or Trump needs to be convicted of this particular thing in order for us to think he wasn't the president.
Right.
However,
every
at
single
some
criticism
point
that he has put forth is potentially institutionally manageable. This is what people are talking about: court packing, impeachments, all of these things are technically possible.
I swear to God, bro, you drive me fucking
You just said
insane.
he wants a revolution. He didn't say that.
He's not talking about. He's not talking about institutional reform, Soy Pill. Do you understand this? He's saying just ignore the fact and then target Fox News.
You can 100% have.
Jessiah said that. Jessiah said that.
You do.
I want to say this to Hutch. Hutch, you realize that Jessiah is flirting with the notion of non-acquiescence with respect
to the court. Him and I have.
Yes.
Yeah. Him and I have gone back.
I know. But you're going. No. But Hutch, you would not accuse Jessiah of wanting a violent revolution when he talks to you.
I would ask him the same question.
Jessiah's a great guy.
I would ask him the same question. You witness us go back and forth on these issues about preserving liberal norms and
yeah.
So I'm consistent.
Well, I'm just saying you're being a little. No, I'm supporting Soy Pill, who's my boy. And I think that he's right. That it doesn't entail judicial non-acquiescence.
Why do you guys do this? He's not talking about passing legislation to expand the court.
My lawyer,
even if he wasn't, Hutch, even if he wasn't, so often you're talking about, especially when we're criticizing the left, look, this was the choice between fascism and not fascism. How the fuck are you not throwing every single fucking thing at the wall and seeing what sticks to try to get it done? And Rashad here is we need to take more extreme issues. This is not going to go away just because we won the midterms. It's not going to go away because of the next election. We need a mandate of the people to poison them against the MAGA mindset, whether that's through influence, through any of these things. How can you say that's taking it too far?
Because I'll explain it to you.
People who lied us into an insurrection should face more punishment than millions of dollars that isn't going to get them. They're not going to fucking blink. They're still there. They could do this again.
Bro, all of this is totally incoherent. We are already doing something right now. We're already employing a strategy to just demolish them. You're saying, let's just throw that out, toss out the Constitution whenever we feel.
I'm not.
Hang on. We're saying toss out the Constitution whenever we feel like.
We're not saying that.
Whenever we feel like it's so crazy.
You just said just arbitrarily target Fox News.
Arbitrary.
It is.
It's
like the crime. What is the crime?
Dude, my God. Why are you being this way, Hutch? Why can't you just understand?
I am a liberal. I'm a fucking liberal. That's why I don't want to end liberalism.
I want you to commit.
I'm a doctor.
Hutch, I need you to commit. In 4 years, if we're losing in the general, in 6 years, if we lose in the midterms, will you say, oh shit, maybe we needed more of a mandate? Will you say we're right? Can we hold you to that?
What is this? God damn.
Dude, you have to.
Wait, you don't agree? Do you agree with Rashad that we should ignore the courts?
No, I actually hate Soypo. I actually hate you.
Take the pill, Hutch.
No, I hate you. Don't say that. I hate you. Fuck your ass. You have a bad ass. You have a flat ass. It's not even fucking fat and juicy. Flattest ass I've ever seen in my fucking life.
Soypo, we can't just ignore the courts, right? If we want to change the courts, there's all right. No,
but ignore the court.
But the thing is, you're talking about Rashad's like general outlook, perhaps. But the most like inflammatory thing that was just most recently said was something approaching, let Marshall enforce his ruling, something like that. And I think that's a quite provocative thing to say, and I think that it's fair for Hutch to be not on board with that as a liberal, and I'm also not on board with that.
I was making a much more centrist version of Rashad.
Well, isn't JD Vance the same guy that
Rashad, please, can I just say, what happens when we do get the power? Then the other side doesn't listen to us now. Now, how are you going to rule?
What do you mean the other side's not going to listen to us?
If we ignore the Supreme Court now and we deem it illegitimate, and then we say we're not listening to you, and then we take over the court somehow, and now it's our court. Why should the other side listen to us? Why should the other side listen to us?
There's no camps, okay? Stop the camps. You're looking at it from a very, 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 very compact perspective. I hate to sound like a fucking communist, but in theory, if you read the theory, if we reach that point, I'm sorry, but like it'll be like decades, like maybe 4 or more before like we reach the point of like people saying like, well, what if we ignored the Supreme Court? More than likely, the entire nation will realize the Supreme Court's the reason why this fat bitch came back to the presidency, in all honesty. And at some point...
True. Big true twice. Criminal immunity, axing the 14th Amendment. Oof.
If you actually want to uphold liberalism, you have to understand liberalism is not just the word of the law. It's the intention of the law, the spirit of the law. And if somebody seeks to upend that or destroy that, you don't give them carte blanche to do it indefinitely. And you want the public to be able to see the signs of when someone's trying to do that. You don't want to play a game of like, well, we represent the good side of things and hopefully one day you'll see it that way. No, you need a public that can say, hold on a minute. We wouldn't have ran into that Capitol if you hadn't fucking lied. Okay. We wouldn't have been able to galvanize tangible physical force to upend and disrupt a federal proceeding had you not utilized your lies to amplify this. And Fox News, by the way, I don't know if this is true, but maybe I'd have to investigate, might have even continued hinting at it even after the insurrection. So it's important to keep in mind that, like, if you love liberalism so much, you can't just wait until someone's standing above you ready to end you before you say, well, actually, maybe.
All right, well, let's play out your scenario then, okay? So you have President Newsom, and he instructs AG Jack Smith to indict Fox News for, you say, conspiracy to, I don't know what you said. And then, okay, so now you've arrested, the fucking Murdochs or whatever, and they hire lawyers, and they go to a judge, and the judge goes, what the fuck is this? We have a First Amendment. This is insane. There's no crime here. Get fucked. What do you do?
That judge is full of shit. You can't honestly...
But what do you do?
Hold on a minute. That judge is fucking removed. Are you fucking serious?
Okay, come on.
No, hold on.
Where are my fellow liberals? Is this live and learn?
Let me answer.
All right.
It's like...
You don't want a dictatorship.
Hold on a minute. Can somebody... What did Eileen Cannon do? For Trump, what did she do? For that favorite?
Well, you're gonna have to be more specific than that.
What was that thing? What was that ruling?
There's a bunch.
Fuck, there was one she did where I was like,
there's multiple.
This is crazy.
I'll tell you them real quick. So the most crazy thing she did is she took jurisdiction over in the execution of the Warren and Mar-a-Lago, which was like totally fucking ridiculous and insane. She claimed that Jack Smith was invalidly appointed. And now, most recently, she's like purporting to permanently enjoin the release of the second volume of the Smith report. So that's just a small list of insane shit she did. She did insane shit.
So like, it's kind of like this thing of like, again, do you want to follow the letter of the law because it's the law, or are you trying to follow the intention of it? Because if a judge is saying, I'm going to use my legal...
The law is democracy, right?
Hold on. The law is democracy. However, we framed our laws in such a way to bring about a specific purpose, right? Like, what was the purpose of the laws? The laws was to create, I would imagine, a free and open society that respects the rule of law, transition of power, democracy,
individual rights.
So forth. Individual rights. When someone says, I'm going to use the purpose of this government and the power invested in me to help someone overturn all of those things, do you think it even matters a single smidget of a fuck when the actual tangible consequences of allowing those people to gain power actually seeps in? Imagine telling somebody actually suffering from this regime, well, we followed the rules of democracy.
That's why I asked you. That's why I asked you the question. Are you just?
You would want to in that scenario.
No. It was the bigger question. But the question I want to ask you is, do you think liberalism is just not enough, and it's just we need a new system then, right?
Something a little bit different, but not radically. No.
Not radically, but hold on. Not radically, but if a judge gives you a ruling that you don't like, you imprison them?
A ruling that you don't like under specific circumstances. By the way, a ruling that you don't like. I like that wording you use. It's very dishonest.
A ruling
that you don't like.
Wait. Why is it dishonest? What's better wording?
A ruling in the midst of a political party trying to end democracy, and the judge who studied law, knows that they are aiding and abetting in this ruling with allowing a media company that without its misinformational spread would not be able to galvanize enough of a crowd to go into the Capitol to do this.
But why not appeal the decision?
It's like, I'm going to ignore all of the ways in which...
Why not appeal the decision? Why not appeal the decision first?
Hold on a minute. Appeal the decision. Because I recall correctly, another question was, what if the Supreme Court of the land also ruled? So it's like, at what point do you realize the system is full of people who will use their power
so dissolve
to compromise any accountability?
So dissolve the courts, right?
Your response is, well, we'll appeal it. And I suppose that if the highest court of the land also says no, you will sleep warmly at night. Knowing you respected liberalism, and no matter what consequences may come from whatever consequences may come from these people maintaining power or coming back, you can sleep soundly at night because you defend liberalism. I
think liberalism is pretty fucking dope.
That's like empty nonsensical,
I think liberalism has ushered in like unprecedented individual rights.
Who's disagreeing with you here?
You're saying that it's not.
I love liberalism more than you because when somebody threatens it, I realize that sometimes changes have to be made because we're in a different era than we were in the 1700s.
Don't you realize that you're saying I love liberalism so much that I would be willing to dissolve liberalism to protect it?
That's not even what we're talking about.
That is what you're saying.
It's not.
We are 12 minutes over, and we haven't struck Iran yet. We have not talked about Iran yet. Do we want to say something real quick and Google it? This could go on forever.
Jesus. Rashad doesn't know the full details of the Dominion case. I'm guessing that's why Hutch was asking what laws were broken. One thing Stephen said is that the right never discusses that Donald Trump needs to do better with messaging because Sean Hannity is the one who's doing the messaging. Rashad said he wants Schumer and Jeffries gone. I think where he's mistaken is that Schumer and Jeffries are very good at the job of being a politician, they're just not good at communicating it. And the only way around that, or the solution would be for the media to do the messaging for them. I think they were talking past each other a bit. Fact is, Fox News settled with Dominion because they thought they'd lose the court case against them, meaning they'd be found guilty in a civil court of knowingly lying about whether America had a free and fair election in 2020. Surely there should be legal consequences for their actions, ? I think you can make a liberal argument for that. What the fuck happened to the subreddit? It's full of tankies and Leninists again. Who are the tankies and Leninists? What the fuck are you guys talking about? Is Hutch just completely missing the point? No. Give me a second. I can explain the disagreement. It's a legitimate disagreement for both of them to have. I'm sure there's some origination in Greek stuff here. Usually you have like a hero in like a film or anime thing. This hero usually embodies some kind of virtues. They're usually against a villain. I think usually they have some kind of vice or vices. And then generally speaking, in every single like standard hero, I think movie or anime or TV show or whatever else, I think usually when the hero is embodying these virtues in some way, I think he tends to defeat the villain who is embodying these vices in some way. Like if you think of like any standard hero movie, I think more or less it should always play out. So like for Iron Man, the one guy who's adversarial to Tony just wants to kill people and murder, and he doesn't have any kind of curiosity or problem solving. He steals Tony's work. He's just not a great guy. And ultimately, I think he loses when his suit freezes in the end because he never figured out this problem, and then he dies. Tony tries to save people and do good things and is exploring things curiously and building his little suit and all that. Like, so he's embodying these healthy, good virtues, and he tends to win, stuff like this. That's not why he died, though. I don't remember if something happened at the end that killed him besides the ice thing. I don't remember. The arc reactor, does it blow up? He fell in the arc reactor. Fuck, I don't remember which part made him die. Did he fall in the arc reactor? Something like that. I don't know. Sometimes you'll get a protagonist, and the protagonists themselves will have vices, and then through the ownership of these vices or the practice of these vices, you die or lose somehow. These are called tragedies for Shakespearean plays, maybe probably for Greek plays too or whatever. Like Hamlet, I think was one of these. Oh, is it Macbeth? That's what I'm thinking. Not Hamlet, Macbeth. If you have a protagonist and they embody some kind of vice or whatever, generally that vice you die at the end, right? Generally speaking, even though we don't think about it, all art tries to convey something morally good or tries to embody or encourage some kind of like morally virtuous thought, behavior, whatever, in the mind of the recipient. Even stuff that might seem contrary to that generally isn't, if you think about it. It's very rare that there'll be some art where somebody will just wholly embody a vice, have really good outcomes at the end, or wholly embody some virtue and have really bad outcomes at the end. That's very, very, very rare in media. You generally are always finding a way to celebrate virtues, finding a way to punish vices. This is almost always happening in media, in art, I would say more broadly. One thing that kind of annoyed me sometimes with certain ways, so there are two ways, I think there are two clever ways that you can get around, I guess, like real life problems when it comes to one faction or another. Well, like how does one human persevere over another human? Sometimes you can replace a human with a monster, so it feels good to always beat them. The monsters are usually always encompassing bad vices. So you have like your Gokus, your DBZ. I don't know if Naruto has monsters or whatever, but like when the other side is a monster, the monsters are generally always like greedy, selfish, evil, like killing things for no reason or whatever. So it's another like virtue over vice. There was an anime called Kenshin, Rurouni Kenshin. I think they made a remake of it and they made a live action thing as well. But one thing that was interesting in this show, one of his virtues was never ever killing. Okay, so he had like a reverse blade sword, so when he hit people it never killed them, and that was his big virtue. And one thing that kind of bothered me sometimes about the anime is like, well, what do you do when you run into an enemy and you don't kill them? They keep coming back and then they kill you over and over and over and over again. I feel like there was always like a clever way that the plot would get rid of somebody so that he didn't have to deal with them again, and it felt a little bit unsatisfying. Like, he doesn't actually kill Shishio, does he? Doesn't Shishio, like, his body overheats because of his past injuries and then, like, the ship explodes or something? Am I making this up? I don't think he actually kills him. They always find, like, a clever way to deal with things so that he can embody this virtue of never killing, but then it always ends up with things working out in the end anyway. Oh, Trigun, I think, was like that as well. I don't think Vash tried to never kill again as well. Oh, Batman. Oh, fuck, that's a much better modern example. Batman is another great example of that. Batman will never, ever kill. That's one of his virtues. Batman and Kenshin are almost interchangeable here, except Batman never was a murderer or whatever. There's always like a clever way that Batman's enemies are taken care of, right? Either another villain will kill them or like an ally will kill them. I think Bane dies because Catwoman rolls in on the bike. There's like a clever way where Batman's villains are always kind of like taken care of somehow, so he doesn't have to actually do it. But then there's this concept of, what do you do when there is a villain? So you have a villain, and it's like a big, bad, mega villain, okay? But like the villain is like so mega big bad, it can't be defeated for whatever reason. In world, it seems like this villain can't be defeated by a virtuous hero. It seems like impossible. And I feel like at that point, you introduce the concept of, this is where kind of like your anti-hero comes in. So it feels like, for some reason, a virtuous hero is too restricted or constrained by their virtues to defeat the vicious villain. So then you have to have somebody come in who's able to break the rules. Some virtue is not embodied. Usually it's some kind of killing thing or whatever, or some investigator who doesn't play by the rules or whatever bullshit. A really good movie example of this, I'm dating myself so hard with these. Actually, no, I don't even think I was alive when this movie was made, but the perfect example of this really is, there's a movie called Demolition Man.
At the end of a century, ravaged by violence, a society of perfect order will arise.
I was alive, it was 93.
Criminals will be frozen and reprogrammed in cryogenic prisons.
The prisoners are ice cubes. Their criminal instincts are being reprogrammed as they sleep.
aggression, and deviant behavior will be totally eliminated.
Holy 90s!
He's a criminal the likes of which you have never seen. In a bad time, he was the worst.
I'm gonna love running this place.
But in the year 2032...
This morning, Simon Phoenix escaped from this cryo facility. We are, quite frankly, not equipped to deal with the situation.
So this Wesley Snipes character, I don't remember how. My guess is some greedy corporate guy sets him free for some greedy corporate reason, because that was every plot line. Well, it has actually been for like the past 3 decades. But he's basically released into society, and there's like a scene where the cops are trying to pull him over, and the cops are like, get down. And he's like, I'm not going to listen to you. And the cops are like, holy shit, we don't know what to do. So they have to bring out the old guy, Sylvester Stallone's character, who also knows how to, break the rules of modern society. Okay. All this to say, okay, fuck whatever. This was such a good quote. I'm trying to remember who, somebody asked a video game designer this or something like that. Fuck, it was something along the lines of like, why is it that, who was it? It was like, it was some media thing. It was like, why did this villain win over this hero? Why did this guy win this thing? And the creator answered, he was like, but because I wrote it that way. That's why. Because it's exactly as I wanted it to go, because I'm the author of the media. I can do whatever I want with it. Anytime you're consuming media, it could be a movie, it could be an anime, it could be the Bible, whatever positive message that you want conveyed. And generally, I would say you're almost always trying to convey positive messages, universally in art. The positive message is usually going to carry through. Virtues will be rewarded, vices will be punished. This is like, I would say this is as close to universal as possible. One thing I think that gets really weird is applicability to real life, because we'd like to imagine that a lot of the things that we see in art are going to, in some ways, resemble reality, and in some ways, reality will resemble art, that virtues will also be rewarded. And in general, I think this is true, in that if you act virtuously, there'll be good things for you. If you act viciously with vice, generally speaking, it's going to be worse outcomes in your life. But then sometimes you have to wonder if maybe that won't be the case. I think this is like, it's hard to know if that's the case. I don't know how they do this I guess I would have to think more in anime or movies or whatever. Usually you find a way to reintegrate like the anti-hero back into the hero. I have not consumed enough media to generalize this, but I think from most media I've seen, somehow the anti-hero gets subsumed back into the hero by the end of the medium. So if I think of like Code Geass, for instance, I think in Code Geass, Lelouch is like some guy trying to break people free of some oppressive system, but he has to become the oppressive system in order to break them free. But then he realizes to truly break them free, he has to die at the very end, right? And then he's replaced with a more virtuous hero. Maybe you could argue, maybe V for Vendetta. Would I say that guy is an anti-hero? Maybe. He fucking kills people and blows shit up and does terror attacks and stuff. He dies at the end of that movie, I think, to usher in the new period. You could argue that in Rurouni Kenshin sacrifice as the manslayer into becoming the non-killing person he's trying to usher in a new era by becoming some kind of new, basically like a totally different person. Always at the end of the media, I feel like somehow the anti-hero is he either dies or he becomes the hero again, or he embodies some virtue, or something happens where he gets subsumed back into this, or he ends up dying at the end. He kind of has to, Now, again, why do anti-heroes defeat the villains? And then why do anti-heroes always somehow like either die or make their way back to heroes at the end? I feel like it happens because it's media, and because we write media that way, and because we want the media to go that way, because we want to convey positivity, because that's like, I feel like that's just an intrinsic part of the human spirit. If you're creating art, if you are a human, you're conveying an artistic message, you want to convey some kind of positivity there. Sometimes in the real world, I'm not sure how much this works out, and it gets kind of weird, but my understanding of a lot of communist regimes, a lot of revolutionary parties and stuff, will overthrow what's oftentimes authoritarian, fascistic, horrible, corrupt administration, a villain, and they'll do it with violence and all of this. You can argue anti-hero, but it's reality and it's not fiction. They don't actually become like the heroes, but they walk this path instead of, once you've become an anti-hero, this isn't really a thing, right? In the real world, it can just be another villain. You're just a villain. You've become this thing. I think this is why it was important when Washington stepped down after being president, and he didn't try to run over and over and over and over and over again. It's because, he actually made the journey from, I don't know if you would say anti-hero to hero, from president to whatever, but like, it was a revolutionary war, right? We overthrew the last government, but then we respected the rules of the new one, right? So in a way, I think that that kind of happened. For a lot of the communist regimes, it seems like that didn't happen. I feel like that's why people like Che Guevara a lot, is because that guy would do like a revolution in some place, and then he would go somewhere else and do a revolution, and go somewhere else and revolution. He wouldn't stay and become like this weird, corrupt, single-party regime, despite, I believe he had offers, I think like from Castro and stuff, to stay and just basically become a fat, loser commie fuck or whatever. I don't think I've said anything too controversial here. You might nibble around the edges, but I think broadly speaking, these are like pretty standard media story takes. One big issue that I feel like we're running into right now is you have like liberalism, and the Republicans, like MAGA, is a party operating with vice. They'll lie, cheat, steal, they have no respect for rule of law, whatever they can do to gain some advantage here, they will. And for the liberal people, right? Liberal people, they see themselves as, and they are, I would say, with respect to the liberal system, you're embodying some kind of virtue here, right? There is no hero movie ever. You cannot have a traditional hero movie where the hero adopts vice to defeat the villain. Almost every time that will lead to the hero either losing or becoming. I feel like there are iconic scenes in movies where there's a protagonist wrestling with the idea of like, I have to do something. I have to break I guess you could argue again to the Batman thing where the Joker's like, you're going to have to break your rule. Ha 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 ha. There was a famous movie with Hugh Jackman. It's not really a hero movie, but they lock up, and do they actually torture, or they think about torturing a crazy guy that they think abducted their child? But I don't know if he actually goes through with it or not, but it's a huge, is it called Prisoner? It's a huge, like, they do torture him? Yeah. It's like a big deal in terms of like, is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing to do? This is that concept, like if you stare into the abyss long enough, it stares back at you, basically, where it means it becomes you become that thing. Where the hero will grapple for a bit of like, oh man, do I need to kill somebody? Oh, in Kenshin it happens when that guy is gonna kill the little baby or whatever, and then Kenshin's like, oh, I'm gonna have to kill this guy anyway, but then through wacky plot stuff, he ends up not killing him or whatever, right? The reason why this is an important part, I think, in a lot of like hero or shonen or superhero slop movie media, the reason why a lot of this back and forth is important is because the hero has to win through embodying virtue, and the villain has to lose through embodying vice, because that's just the message that we convey in art. That's how we want to convey that message in art. We want to show that if you're a bad person, you're rewarded for it, and if you're a good person, you lose for it. You don't want to ever convey that. It's a horrible thing to convey. But in real life, maybe it doesn't always work out that way. Maybe it doesn't always work out. It doesn't always work out that way. So when you look at people like Hutch, and you could say Destiny from 2024, maybe? I don't know. I've unfortunately, I think I've moved off this point at this point. There are other players in here as well. Pisco is still a little bit in here, I think. The idea is that liberalism encompasses some set of virtues, and it has to encompass those virtues. And if you want to start encompassing what MAGA is doing, the vice, so it might be prosecuting Dominion, and trying to lock them up for no reason, and fabricating criminal charges and firing judges that we don't agree with. These are all the things that Hutch was saying. Hutch is coming at this from the perspective of, I am embodying this ideology here, this hero aspect, this virtue thing, where we don't engage in this kind of vice behavior. We can't do it, because once you start to engage in that behavior, again, if you just look at this from an art media point, the hero never engages in vice to defeat the enemy. This is always a path to self-destruction every single time. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if there's an anti-hero in real life. I don't know what that ever looks like that doesn't just become corrupt themselves, but it's hard to like answer this question of what do you do when this person has a vice that is capable of defeating your virtue, and you don't have somebody authoring a story that is going to ensure that the good guy has to win at the end. It's hard to know what the answer is. It seems like people like Rashad, people like Jessiah, me now, are kind of in this route where it's like, okay, well, we obviously need to anti-hero a little bit. So when we say anti-hero, what do we mean? When you talk about wanting to do things to Trump and his compatriots, when Hutch is asking, what do you charge him with? What's the crime? Hutch is operating from a virtue perspective. Hutch is saying, we have to find a way to do this the right way, guys. That's what Hutch is saying. This is not wrong or bad. This is the moral perspective that he's coming from. But if you've shifted down here to the anti-hero perspective, what you thought of at this point is like, we just need to think of the outcome, and we can pretextualize anything we want to get there. If we've decided that Trump and all of his losers need to be charged with a crime, well, if we're going to start to embody some level of vice, which is what an anti-hero does, then getting to the charge is easy, right? I think somebody threw up the idea of like, well, what if they pardon everybody? Then it's like, okay, well, what did the Trump admin try to do? They tried to claim that AutoPen invalidated all of Biden's pardons. We could find a way to invalidate Trump's pardons. That's easy. Once you've decided that you want to effect some outcome, getting there through law or process is trivial. It's trivially easy. We've just seen an originalist traditional court wholesale manufacture distinct actions that a president can take that put them beyond the reach of any criminal procedure ever, which is unbelievable. It's unfathomable. Or we've seen deactivation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment because the Supreme Court just thought it was inconvenient, right? So if you want to do something, it's trivially easy to do it. It's trivially easy to do it. You just have to make that decision. I'm sorry. This is a long fucking explanation, but when you see people like Hutch fighting people like Crenshaw or Jessiah or me now, because this is kind of where I'm at, what's happened here is that the people in the liberalism camp have split, and what they've seen is that the virtuous like hero type character here doesn't seem to be able to contend with the vicious villain here, which I think is kind of embodied in the 2024 election. Something is not working here. So it seems like we have to find a way to borrow from some vice here that the villain exhibits and then incorporate that into some kind of anti-hero behavior. Now, when Hutch keeps saying, when you've done this, you're the same as them, you've done this, you're the same as them, problem is that if you incorporate that, you have to find a way then to ditch it once you've gotten rid of the villain, which in media usually happens with the death of the anti-hero, or somehow they have some radical transformation or change, but it's hard to let go of that power or let go of that vice, because vices exist for a reason. They do, at least in the short term, benefit you, right? They must, but it's hard to ditch that. All of that to say, people are like asking like, oh, was Hutch right? Was the Crenshaw guy right? Was Jessiah right? I tend to side with the other guys. I'm down here in this camp now because fuck all this shit. But like, I was here before, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I suck at keeping track of time. And I argued very ardently for this, but when you heard me say on stream over and over again, I was like, we have to have a positive outcome. We have to think that like some amount of virtue will prevail, that the human condition is set up for this. I was speaking from this type of liberal perspective, or this type of like hero embodying virtue perspective, that if we embody the right virtues, it will always be a positive outcome in the end. But in the real world, that might not always be true. So you have to figure out how to flirt with this position in the real world without letting it completely consume you. Another part of this was when Crenshaw was talking about how liberalism exists as a concept, and then it's protected by the system that we have now, and then we live in and exist in the system. But the system is an instrument to effect the ideas of liberalism. Once the system has been sufficiently corrupted and is no longer effecting the ideas of liberalism, then we have to work outside of the system, or we have to change the system to bring those principles back in line. Because what Crenshaw was arguing was that if you want to be a Hutch that stays within the system of liberalism that's been irredeemably somehow corrupted by MAGA, just because the system is called liberalism doesn't mean it's serving the ideals of liberalism if it's no longer capable of carrying out the ideological promises that liberalism makes. It's hard to know what the correct answer is here, because generally enemies are monsters or villains that are like very clearly monsters or evil things, or we're in some kind of medium where the ending is written by an author and we know that it's always going to turn out okay at the end. But like, what if that's not necessarily the case all the time? It could also be the case that both of these roles are important, and that both of these things that work in tandem with each other. Kind of falsely, lefties like to say that this was like MLK and Malcolm X, but that wasn't a good comparison there. But maybe kind of if we think like in terms of media, somebody in chat pointed out, it would be like Batman down here versus like is it Jim Gordon up here? Because I think Gordon basically never... Oh, actually, Gordon's a really good example, because Gordon has a moment where he flirts with the Vice. I don't know if he got inspired by Batman or whatever, but... Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is Dent. This isn't Gordon. This was Dent flirting with Vice. But Dent, like, captures some fucking crazy Joker dude, and he's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna kill this guy.
I'm not gonna leave it up to me.
But like, he can't become an anti-hero. That's Batman's role, right? So Batman literally intervenes here and stops him here and tells him like, this can't be the road that you go down. It doesn't work that way, because then we have actually lost everything. But like, the Joker technically wins because he is able to corrupt Dent here. Although you could argue maybe Gordon takes his place after as a good figure.
Life to chance.
The only issue that you have to have is, the only thing where I would start to levy harsh criticisms against a Hutch-type character, but I don't think Hutch makes this mistake, is when you assume that you're dealing with when it's just two virtuous actors that are disagreeing with each other. Now, in media, you would never really do that, because I don't think you have two heroes in a thing. It doesn't make any sense, right? You have to recognize that you are competing with a vicious villain here, but somehow you have to hope or think that your virtue is going to work. And there are things that Hutch says sometimes that makes me think he thinks of MAGA as being a virtuous body. Because one thing that you have to consider for good versus evil stories is the evil is never actually restrained by anything that the good does, right? So heroes and anti-heroes might represent some constraint on each other's behaviors, or two heroes or a group of like virtuous people will restrain each other's behaviors. But the villain is very rarely restrained by anything that the hero does. I feel like there are moments in media where the hero even thinks that the villain will be constrained, and then the villain does something, and it's like, what? I can't. There's like a hostage or something happens, and the hero's like, oh well, and he's like still kind of cool, and then the villain like kills somebody, and he's like, oh my god, what? You're fucking right, like something like that. Yeah. So that would be the only issue is like, how can you defeat this person over here that is embodying vice? Don't assume that they're playing in your world. Oh, the reason why I make that don't assume that thing, and why I'm saying that the villain isn't really constrained by the actions of the hero, generally speaking, is because it's because when Hutch makes an argument like, if we do this, then they'll do this in the future, that argument is always wrong. No matter what you think of being a hero or being an anti-hero or whatever, if your MO, if the way that you're operating is you're thinking, okay, I don't want to do this because MAGA will do this in the future, you're operating from the assumption that they're only going to do things to punish actions that you've done, and you've bought into their framing as hero versus hero type behavior. But that's not true. If tomorrow the MAGA movement and the politicians thought that it would benefit them to expand the Supreme Court, it would happen. They're not going to think like, well, did they get us back or did they do something to us? Like the only constraint that exists on them now is that the lawmakers know that Trump is going to be gone in a few years. But the only thing that like really limits behavior over here is they have to ditch this vice shit and come back in line to being like real human beings and virtuous people or whatever. Yeah. Why are we looking at politics through the lenses of a story? I don't understand what the use is, and it activates my BS senses. Well, then feel free to think everything I just said was bullshit. But I think that stories map onto human experience. We tell the same story over and over again for a reason, and art resembles life to some extent, and people view themselves in the lenses of the things that art shows us, whether you agree or not. I think it's almost undeniable. We feel like we have antagonists or protagonists in our life, and we play out stories and all this bullshit. So how is anything fixed in the long run, though? I've never seen an explanation of how you unfuck the MAGA movement. Because I'm down here, I would say that there has to be a broad, sweeping, retributive action against the right that makes it so that in the future, the new conservative movement that comes up out of the carcass of MAGA is existing somewhere over here. With the thought being, we can't rig our shit or lie blatantly or do this kind of unhinged shit anymore because there are going to be severe repercussions for it. So now we're going to figure out a way to play within the system. Everything is all about incentives and disincentives, I think. There must be some laws and stuff the Democrats can pass to prevent this kind of thing from happening. That's not true. When you say there needs to be a law that we can pass to prevent them from acting the way that they've done, it's the same thing as asking, do you think there's a law that we could have passed to make the Joker not act like the Joker in Batman? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense to say that. The Joker is there to break rules or break laws. The Trump administration and the MAGA movement is here to break rules and break laws. The idea of making constraints for a thing that doesn't want to be constrained or doesn't want to play within that system doesn't make sense, which is why I think you need something that's a little bit outside of the system to correct those actions, you know? Can you give any examples of those actions, of which actions that I think need to happen? I think every single member of this cabinet should be somehow, we need to figure out a way to arrest every single member of this cabinet. I don't know on what pretext you do it, but if you decide, if the decision has been made to do a thing, then you can pretextualize your way to anything. But I think every member of the cabinet should be arrested and jailed. It's unbelievable to me. This is one of the things that I hate. Hutch would be against you on that? Yeah, no shit. One of the things that I hated so much when Roberts wrote on the immunity decision is Roberts spends a great deal of time talking about the threat that criminal prosecution has to the actions of the president. That there might be actions that the president would take, but it's possible that the vigorous executive that we all demand and desire would be somehow constrained by threat of future prosecution. And while that is a legitimate thing to think about, Roberts does not spend a single fucking word of his entire fucked opinion talking about, well, what is the interest on the other side of maybe having a president constrained doing things that we don't want him to do, namely crimes. It's insane to me that when the context of criminal law comes up, he would only think about the good actions that might be constrained by criminal law being enforced and not the bad actions being constrained, which is what criminal law exists ideally to put a constraint on. I have no idea why the fuck Roberts didn't write anything or address that particular topic. Yeah, I don't know. Fuck that guy. I feel like every single cabinet member, am I making this up? I think every single cabinet member was asked whether or not Trump won the 2020 election, and I think only one said no or something. I don't know if any cabinet member answered that question that Trump lost. Usually they said something along the lines of like, Biden was president from 2020 to 2024, or like Biden was declared the winner. They hedge it like that. They would not say, I think it was every single cabinet member except for one used some kind of answer like that. They would not say that Trump lost the 2020 election. It was insane, absolute insanity. At what point do we start questioning whether democracy is actually working? Maybe we need to consider whether a stronger, more centralized kind of leadership is what people really respond to. Democracy feels like a joke sometimes. It seems like people want direction and authority. They just don't want to admit they're being led. Yeah, but the issue is like you have to be able to broaden out the context of what you're looking at. It's kind of like when a child starts crying and complaining that their life is like completely fucked because their parents grounded them for the weekend or whatever. And then usually, depending on the parents, this is when they'll bring out the whole starving children in Africa. You're lucky to be in a household where you have access to these things, to have parents that care about you, blah, 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 right? Where it's like, okay, well, hold on. And this is what I like to bring out to people who are like, Trump had to bring us back from the brink. This country was completely fucked before Trump got it. It's like, hold on. When we say democracy is failing, America is failing, our failure is like more stunning than the success of any other nation in the history of the entire planet. Like America failing was still number one GDP in the world, despite our population being dwarfed by China and India. It's still like the leader in technology, leader in military, leader in diplomatic, community with more countries on the planet than any other major power. I don't know if you consider China, Russia major powers or whatever, but like best educational institutions on the planet, like leading in corporate business, huge internet stuff. Like the idea that like America has failed is like, wait, in what ways? Jesus Christ. Like talk about falling upwards. Like, I don't know. That's just crazy to me. Jesse, do you think creative justice / retribution should be a part of a Democratic candidate's platform, or is it just something they should push for after the election? I don't know. I feel like we need to do the anti-hero thing, but we have to get back to the hero part after, and I don't know what that looks like or how. I really started thinking about this a lot because I watched this, I watched this clip earlier today.
We seriously having this conversation? How many hats do you think I sold last month? How many hats? I'm like, how many hats? He said like 200. I'm like, oh, well, that's amazing, Mr. President. Anyway, went on like this. This was after.
Lindsey Graham probably bought most of them.
Oh, no. That's not true. Lindsey Graham bought all the knee pads for Donald Trump.
This is stuff that I think is epic and based because you're humiliating your opponent. Like these are things that are good to do to become influential, but I would consider this to be anti-hero behavior. I don't want my political system to look like this. I think that this is good to embrace, even not to just accept, but to embrace for the purposes of overcoming right now the villain. But I don't want, this can't be the rest of my American political, it can't be like this. As much as I appreciate this here, we have to be able to go back to like a normal political environment. Vice isn't self-limiting though. If Democrats push the boundaries, why wouldn't they do it again when it matters again? It would deter that future behavior because there'd be a big punishment for it, right? Why do we have to? What if this sort of rhetoric is the only way to win now? Well, the issue is that I feel like conservatives have gotten themselves into the positions that they're in because they've embraced this type of behavior over actual governance, right? So how is it that you had, MAGA for 4 years and then Trump again, and Trump has basically failed to deliver on every single thing that he talked about? There's absolutely no Doge was one of the most monumental, epic fucking failures of all fucking time. The ICE deportations have been a massive fucking failure. No new wars has turned into warring against the entire fucking world. 90 deals in 90 days has turned into my own Supreme Court is trashing my tariffs, and now the tariffs just got 5 points higher. Trump's affordability is fucked. Housing prices are fucked. Every single part of Trump's plan has been fucked. But I don't think that's on accident. I think that's because the caricature of a politician, the meme bullshit, the insults and all of that are the exact things that they bought into for so long that they forgot how to elect an actual leader. I feel like the 14 years of conservative leadership in the United Kingdom, it feels like it was a little bit similar. You push for all of these crazy policies, none of them will ever work, and then people start electing people for reasons that aren't just, I think you can govern really well, but it becomes reactionary to dumb propaganda, to stupid sloganeering, to people standing in front of retarded fucking buses, to you're doing this type of politics that's not geared towards actually governing your country, but it's geared towards entertainment. Everything turns into like a WWF, WCW match. I think that some form of embracing this is good in the short term to defeat the villain or whatever. We have to get back to normal after this somehow. Holy shit. Hutch Gigamad. How? I gave such a nice take earlier. I said that Hutch's position is understandable. I don't even think I attacked his position necessarily. I just said that I feel like we've moved on from conservatives playing in our liberal playing field. He hates your Batman analogy. Well, then he's going to have to find a better analogy to fight back on. Good luck. In real life, I don't know what that ever looks like. That doesn't just become corrupt themselves. But it's hard to answer this question of what do you do when this person has a vice that is capable of defeating your virtue, and you don't have somebody authoring it.
But they're not defeating our virtue, though. This is what I mean.
Oh, no. He's going to say, he keeps going back to this point. He's going to say, they're not defeating it because they're losing at the polls and they're going to lose in the midterms. They've already won a huge amount, though. Them losing in the midterms is not the victory that we're looking for. It was never the victory we were looking for. Trump won the 2024 election with a popular vote. Winning, just to call that a victory, I just feel like is so, I don't agree. But I'm pretty sure that's what he's going to say. We're winning. The popularity and everything is in our favor right now.
I feel like he is playing into the propaganda. He's trying to use the DOJ to go after his political enemies. How's that working out?
Well, he managed to get his attorney general to put a fake lawyer in to fabricate indictments against people. I mean, he was able to do that. The judges worked as a backstop, but this is almost like a Ben Shapiro tier argument of the guardrails are holding. My argument is not so much that Trump is successfully executing on all of his desires. It's more that the Republican establishment around him is allowing it, and the American public, in my opinion, I would say, are largely indifferent to it. Now, I know that his popularity is low, and I know that he doesn't poll well around these issues like he did before, but in my mind, this would be a thing where it's the polls should be 96-4 against him. I understand having big 20-point leads is nice, but this shouldn't be even remotely close. This should be you just lost 35 seats in the Senate type of shit. Not we took back the House and we're close in the Senate now. I feel like that's the lost fight. I feel like that's the bad framing, in my opinion.
How the fuck is that working out? They've had cases laughed out of court for Comey, for Letitia James. Pam Bondi Janine Pirro, who's now a fucking prosecutor, and I don't even remember, announced that she's giving up on trying to find charges for the seditious six. Trump is trying to do a lot of things, and he's being constrained by the girthy fucking cock of American liberal democracy.
He's being constrained barely, solely by just the judiciary, but our Congress should be restraining him as well, but they're not. There's no restraints whatsoever, and the administration should have some self-restraint, but they have none, and the American people are nowhere near as far against it as they need to be, is the issue. We can't be happy to just keep testing the guardrails over and over and over again.
And he's paying a political price for all of this corruption and overreach.
He's a lame duck. I don't have time for this right now.
This is a debate that I've had for years. I'm not entirely sure that I think the president of the United States, no matter who it is obligated to always obey the Supreme Court, because and this is a notion called non-acquiescence, and it really has its genesis for all intents and purposes during the Civil War, because President Lincoln disregarded a court order by Chief Justice Taney about habeas corpus, and his logic was at the time, if I obey this order, it's basically going to jeopardize the war effort. Do I have to forego my duty to take care that all the other laws be faithful for the sake of this one? And so it's something that's been debated by judicial scholars for centuries. It's something I absolutely think about, because the entailment there is that the Supreme Court is the boss of Congress and the president, and it's actually intended to be the weakest of the three branches, weaker than the president, certainly weaker than Congress. So yes, this is something that
can you give me a real world application? Give me a hypothetical where you think it might be appropriate. Yeah. A realistic kind of real world application.
Bitch.
In the modern context.
Oh, I probably couldn't give you one offhand. I don't think I've ever called for non-acquiescence in the modern time. I can't think of a single example, but it's a philosophical notion that there are Supreme Court orders that in theory, I think the president should just ignore. Like Civil War and things of that nature.
Well, I mean, tell me how it came up in the context of you talking about it recently.
There is one modern example. Well, no, because Pisco and I talk about this shit all the time, because we talk about balance of power, separation of powers, which branch is supposed to be dominant over the others. These are common conversations that we've had, just structural conversations about the system of government. But there's one example actually I can think of where I flirted with non-acquiescence, and that was during the Biden administration about the debt ceiling. Okay, so I can't remember all the details at the time. So it was 2022, 2023, when we needed to lift the debt ceiling, and there was a potential government shutdown because the Republicans weren't going to, necessarily give the votes, and there was a lot of debate about whether or not Biden should mint $1 trillion coin or something like that in order to knock off enough debt so that we have some room before we hit the debt ceiling. And there was a debate about whether or not the Supreme Court would force President Biden to default on our debt. If you can't come to an agreement to satisfy the statutory obligations to raise or suspend the debt ceiling, if the Supreme Court said, we got to default on our debt because the president is still spending money that he's not congressionally authorized to use, maybe the president should just ignore them and continue to do that. You're going to have to try to order me to default on the national debt and trigger a global economic catastrophe. And Lawrence Tribe, Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe, one of the most reputable in the business, also made the case that the president might just want to ignore what the Supreme Court says.
Listen, you're my boy, and I love you.
This fucking saying, bro, needs to stop. It needs to stop.
Just want you to know that.
Appreciate that, buddy.
That's really online, buddy. That's really online.
Whoa.
You asked me for an example. What the hell does that mean?
You're talking about ignoring the Supreme Court, Jessiah. This is a really online, not serious thing. Okay, like if you start advocating for, why would it stop there? At that point, if you just ignore the court that blatantly, that kind of way, why would you stop there? And at that point,
Hutch,
you are speed.
Hutch, are you telling me there are no circumstances, under no circumstances, can the president of the United States or Congress disregard the Supreme Court? You can't think of any.
No, yes, but
then shut the fuck up. It's just a matter of where the line is wrong. So fuck your condescension, bro.
You invoked the Civil War.
Condescension.
Jessiah, you invoked the Civil War.
Fuck it. You're right. So there's a line, Hutch.
Yes.
So again, fuck your holier than thou shit.
No,
fuck it. You asked me for a specific example where you asked me for a specific example outside of Civil War, and I answered.
We were kind of almost there, right? An insurrection is like the first part of a civil war, maybe J6, right? Maybe, yeah, maybe.
There was one that I was flirting with.
Jessiah.
And by the way, it's not just me, asshole. Highly educated judicial scholars.
People. I understand. There's a lot
of Lawrence Tribe, famous and not serious person.
It's not serious. You're not thinking about it. Like you invoked the last time that happened.
Oh my god. You
gotta let me talk, bro. I let you talk.
I answered your fucking question, and you're spending all this time condescending me. I answered you in good faith. I don't give a fuck if you don't think. I don't give a fuck if you don't think that it's a serious example.
Relax, calm down.
In good faith,
I'm playing with you with banter. It's banter. Chill.
It's not. No, it's not banter.
I'm being half serious, but it is banter. But you're saying
I know you're being. I know you well enough to. I know you well enough to know when you're being serious, and you just admit I'm being half serious.
Let me respond to it then. Let me respond to it.
Wait a minute. If you're just going to condescend me, no, thank you.
What? Are you pulling out of the conversation then? I won't condescend you. I will be so nice and civil.
Then proceed.
Okay. You're not thinking about it. Like you invoked the last time that happened.
Oh my god.
You gotta let me talk, bro. I let you talk.
I answered your fucking question, and you're spending all this time condescending me. I answered you in good faith. I don't give a fuck if you don't think. I don't give a fuck if you don't think that it's a serious example.
Relax, calm down.
In good faith.
I'm playing with you with banter. It's banter. Chill.
It's not. No, it's not banter.
I'm being half serious, but it is banter. But you're saying
I know you're being. I know you well enough to. I know you well enough to know when you're being serious, and you just admit I'm being half serious.
Let me respond to it then. Let me respond to it.
Wait a minute. If you're just going to condescend me, no, thank you.
What? Are you pulling out of the conversation then? I won't condescend you. I will be so nice and civil.
Then proceed.
Okay. You brought up the last time that this happened, non-acquiescence, in the context of a civil war. Obviously, that is a totally different calculation. If we are at the point where we're in a civil war, then dude, so many bets, like all bets are off. Like, you try to preserve the system as much as you can, and you at the same time you're in a war with people that want to take it over and maybe do like a fascist takeover and do like a coup or whatever and like basically destroy the system. At that point, you have to make all kinds of compromises. I mean, I'm like, of course, like there were illiberal things that happened when we were fighting the Civil War, but we're not there right now. We are like 20 steps removed from that. And I just want to ask you if you think that it's a realistic solution to just start ignoring the Supreme Court. And I'm just asking you, like, do you not think at that point that the right wing in this country are gonna take up arms and it's just on like Donkey Kong at that point, right?
That is a possibility.
That's what don't you want to avoid that? Don't you want to avoid that, bro?
Do you remember how this topic just came up?
Oh no.
You asked me about me saying that you were too online.
Right. So I asked you a question, a very specific question. You said, well, it's based off something I heard from Pisco about the Supreme Court. And I said, well, there is this notion called non-acquiescence, and it's happened in the past. It's just very, very rare. And it's something that's being discussed and has been discussed for centuries by judicial scholars. And I gave you a specific example. Then you wanted to focus on non-acquiescence. And you said, well, why would you be talking about that with Pisco? Well, again, Pisco and I have conversations, like broad, abstract conversations about separation of powers and checks and balances all the time.
Right.
And then when you asked me for what non-Civil War example could I possibly conceive of where non-acquiescence might be permissible, I said, I remembered the one about the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
Because if we defaulted on our debt, it would trigger a domestic and global economic catastrophe that would probably make the Great Depression look like a walk in the park, which is why at the time there were judicial scholars like Lawrence Tribe and others suggesting that maybe if the president forces the issue to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court says you need to default on the debt because you didn't statutorily meet the terms of raising or suspending the debt ceiling, that the president, for the sake of the domestic and global economy, should just give the court the finger and keep spending money to pay off the debt. Now, I said that was an example where, of course, I considered it. And you responded with the most unhinged, condescending rant. How dare you even think in such a scenario about violating or disregarding the Supreme Court? And if we did it, wouldn't the right, raise up in rebellion? I'm not suggesting that that is something that any president, Democrat or Republican, invoke on the regular, but I can imagine some extraordinary crisis like either a civil war or a domestic or global economic catastrophe where the court could probably be ignored for the greater good. Now, having reiterated that all again, do you really think that responding the way you did was appropriate?
Listen, the context. Listen, what you're saying right now is reasonable to me, okay? If you're helping... Jessiah, let me talk, okay? The context of all of this was, I was in a debate last night with Rashad, and Pisco started to do the thing that he does with me, where he tries to trap me in hypocrisy or something like that. He brought you into this, and he said, Josiah's been talking about, like, ignoring the court. That's what he said to me. So that was my impression, right? That's what I'm thinking, right? And so you come in and then you talk about the Civil War, and then you mention this other thing. I'm still in my head thinking like, this is not the only application that it's come up. I mean, are there other times where you've suggested that possibly Biden should have ignored the Supreme Court, or the next Democratic president should possibly ignore the Supreme Court? Was that the only time it came up?
I can't think of any other example where I told Pisco, like a specific example where the court should be ignored.
Okay, I had the wrong impression then, bro.
But here's the frustration. I gave you all that information before you responded the way you did. And this is actually part of the problem, right? Which is going back to my initial question about where you said where I'm too online. And I've said this to you before, and wait a minute, I've said this to you before, and I've said this to you in multiple conversations before, including the one earlier today, where you and I can just exchange straw men about one another if you want.
I'm glad you clarified. Okay. Listen, I'm glad you clarified.
I appreciate that.
I'm giving you like insight into why I was thinking this. The reason I said anything online, I was responding to Pisco said, you are quote, and I think I quote here, he said, Jessiah is starting to talk about like possibly ignoring the Supreme Court. But that's what I'm working off of, bro. That's what's in my head. And so in that context, I hear that, and I'm like, that's way too online if we're just casually talking about ignoring the Supreme Court. If you're talking about a potential hypothetical where it's, like the global meltdown of the entire like interconnected economy, if it's like avoiding that, then it's the same like fucking trolley problem, harm reduction principle. I would totally be willing to entertain. But again, my impression of where you were at and you being too online. Wait, can you acknowledge that though? If I'm told,
no, I can't. No, respectfully, I can't. I understand you having that impression going in, but then when you asked the question the first time and I answered it, then whatever misapprehension you were under or implication you got from Pisco should have went out the fucking window.
No, come on, bro.
Yes, because Pisco didn't give you specific examples. Now, if you'll allow me to talk about the context that Pisco and I have talked about this in. So one of the issues that I wrestle with all the time in my version of the Supreme Court, or my assessment of the Supreme Court, is the fact that we don't have three co-equal branches. We have three coordinate branches. And the founders were very, very clear that the Supreme Court was intended to be the weakest of the branches, weaker than the president, and Congress was supposed to be stronger than both. It's supposed to be Congress, then the president, then the Supreme Court. And one of the things that I wrestle with all the time is, in practice, it's actually the Supreme Court on top, because the Supreme Court can effectively issue commands to the other two branches. And the expectation since Marbury versus Madison, and particularly since the Civil War, has been if the Supreme Court issues an order, the other two branches are obligated to obey. So the Supreme Court can strike down federal statute and can also strike down executive orders. Well, what options do the other two branches have? Congress really can't do anything, right? If Congress passes a law and it's signed into law by the president, so you have two branches versus one, the Supreme Court reviews that law, passed by Congress, signed by the president, and says, oh, it's unconstitutional, we're striking it down. The only way to get around that at that point, other than getting the court to change its mind or packing the court or something, is to do a constitutional amendment. And we've had 27 constitutional amendments in 250 years out of literally more than 10,000 attempts. We have the hardest constitution to amend in the world. And the president by himself is effectively totally powerless against the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can tell the president no. And then under our current system, the president is obligated to obey. So as I've talked with Pisco multiple times, how is that, if anything, other than a total inversion of what the founders intended? If I can tell you no and you're obligated...
Actually, I don't know. I imagine Jessiah has talked to more people and read more theory on this than I have, considering I've read basically no theory on it. Like in some ways, the Supreme Court can check the other two branches, but like, I guess the president can't really do anything. But Congress could pass a law regarding the Supreme Court, right? Like, let's say the Supreme Court says, oh, you're not allowed to tariff. And then Congress is like, okay, well, we're going to pass a new law, so now he can tariff. I mean, there's impeachment as well, right? And the president nominates judges too. I don't know.
Obligated to obey. We're not equals. I'm your boss. So we've had that conversation. Yeah. But I've never, that I can think of, ever advocated, other than the debt ceiling situation, for a president to just simply disregard the Supreme Court. But philosophically, and in terms of checks and balances and separation of powers, yes, I think it's a really good fucking question, because the Supreme Court is ultimately, in our current system, the most powerful branch.
But so hang on. I just want to, hold on. I'm pulling up the transcript from the podcast last night. I just want to get exactly what was said, okay? Because if memory serves correctly, where is it? I do a Control F search for Jessiah and it's not popping up. I don't know the exact timestamp.
Yeah, I remember what he said. I understand. So I think Pisco was a bit overstating my position.
All right.
But we have talked about the notion of non-acquiescence.
If they're captured enough, couldn't the Supreme Court just deem it unconstitutional? I mean, I guess, but then couldn't the president just disagree and just do whatever anyway? Like, if we're going to go on that route, no?
And as far as the specifics, again, the only one I can think of ever publicly flirting with is the debt ceiling example. But again, Hutch, I love you. You're a friend. And that's part of the reason why I was like, I'm not playing. You really pissed me off. And the reason you really pissed me off is I understand if you had a certain conception of me based on what Pisco said, as soon as you asked the question, and I'm like, well, I can't think of a single example. And then I'm like, okay, well, here's this one specific modern example. And for you to react the way that you did, it was incredibly disrespectful and condescending, especially for a guy who doesn't like, you say all the time, you've said in conversations with me about how you feel that, you're being strawmanned or misrepresented. You ask people to, give the steel man of your impression. I feel you do that to me. And so that's why I came in here actually just asked the question.
But you're steamrolling right now. Let me just say real quick. I had a totally different impression, and it was not my intention to strawman you. And it does look like I was mischaracterizing your perspective. And I wasn't doing that intentionally. I was working off of, in my head, again, I'm being told that the impression is that you're starting.
Yeah, we're having a live and learn institutional crisis right now, okay? But they're resolving it.
To talk about non-acquiescence in a more general sense, okay? So that's where my head is at. And when you gave me your one specific answer, that doesn't like nullify what I heard. Like that wasn't you.
Wait, is this like the hottest Jessiah's ever come in before? Have they ever Have they ever like super fought on issues?
Saying this is the only time I would ever entertain that. I'm still in my head going off of what Pisco told me, which is that he's starting to talk about doing that. Okay, so if like for misrepresenting anything you said, I apologize. I really do. I
appreciate that. Next time you could just ask. Besides the debt ceiling crisis, Jessiah, since I was given to believe that this is something you really want to do.
It was a throwaway line. That's all it was. It wasn't even. I have like strong disagreements with like Steven right now, and I said the same thing about him. But it is kind of like half banter. Okay, I was not working off of it sounds like the reality of the situation. If you're saying that the whole non-acquiescence thing came up in the context of this particular thing, and the greater harm in this case could be like a global catastrophic meltdown, then sure, I would entertain that, and I would say that you're not too online. Okay, I did not have the correct impression of your attitude with respect to non-acquiescence, and I agree with you on like 99% of your prescriptions when it comes to the courts.
Right, and so again, the only other time this has come up is just broad structural philosophical notions like are the other two branches obligated to obey the Supreme Court, and if so, doesn't that necessitate that the Supreme Court be the most powerful branch if they can tell the other two branches what to do, but neither of the other two branches can tell it what to do? Seems to be a vertical relationship and not.
I agree with the binding code of ethics. I agree with the binding code of ethics. I agree with term limits. I would be open to back in the courts. Like this about me, right?
I know, and that's not. But I'm not talking about that. I'm trying to give you the context of when non-acquiescence has come up in conversations with Peace Code. The only specific example are the Civil War example with President Lincoln and Chief Justice Taney and the debt ceiling crisis under Biden. Now, that aside, as far as the two online part, because I remember you saying this, it wasn't even just about the Supreme Court, but again, about the strength of Trump. So that's actually, it wasn't even about the court, why I came in here. I came to ask you why you think I'm too online when it comes to Trump. And I'm curious if you could clarify a bit more. I'm trying to figure out where we're missing each other. You touched on it a bit earlier, but I had to go and record some video. So now that I have time, can you talk about it a bit more?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to reiterate again that I apologize for disrespecting you in that way. For mischaracterizing, okay? I genuinely apologize for that. So I will for sure remember this conversation and make more of an effort to be respectful of you overall in my rhetoric, okay? But a lot of it is kind of like half friendly banter, but touching on some very real frustrations. But if I ever cross any kind of line like that, I do apologize. I do consider you like a friend. I respect you. I respect your work ethic. I like the relationship that we have offline, and I want to protect that friendship. So truly, I apologize.
No, likewise. Okay. I'm the same boat. So go ahead.
Okay. So in the context of what you're touching on, I think there's a big problem with not just like the populist left or like the typical lefties that I have a problem with. I think there's a bigger problem going on in terms of the way that people talk about Donald Trump. I think he is mischaracterized.
Is the Constitution debate going to be live streamed? I have no idea.
To suggest that he is much stronger than in reality he actually is. It's like I get frustrated because I feel like when we talk about Donald Trump in this way and describe him as having more power and having more influence and having more effectiveness as a leader than he actually does, that we are actually playing into his propaganda. Because his whole thing is, I'm so strong. I actually won California. It was just the illegal immigrants, and that's the only reason. And I probably won Maine, and it was all the voter fraud. And everybody
won Minnesota three times.
Everybody respects me now. I feel like so many people are adopting that framework and ignoring the fact that while his individual threats to the liberal order are real and alarming, and we should be vigilant about that, him and his overall political movement have been remarkably weak for the entirety of his time as president. I don't know if you watched the conversation that Brian Tyler Cohen had with Barack Obama, but he gets into a lot of the structural imbalances, and he talked about the asymmetry between the parties right now. We talk a lot about the
rest is boring. They don't fight anymore. How can you possibly know that? This is a live stream that I'm like 1 minute behind on. Are you reading the future?
Symmetry in terms of media coverage. He talked about the structural asymmetry, and he also talked about our aspirational asymmetry. And I know we've talked about this a lot. He was talking about the fact that the things that Democrats want to do, like we want big healthcare reforms. We want constitutional amendment to get rid of Citizens United. We want to like codify, protection for queer people and, codify protection for women to have abortions and these kinds of things. These are things that require consensus. And more importantly, these are things that require 60 fucking votes in the Senate. The things that the Republicans want to do are things that they can largely do with executive power. I mean, and then you have tax cuts through budget reconciliation. Okay. Boom. You just like knocked out like 50% of what you promised. And it just doesn't require the same amount of consensus, the same amount of like making that.
Yeah, that's why I said for years, just for to piggyback off that, that's why I've said for years, like Wick and others, when they say, the Republicans have a principled commitment to the filibuster. It's like, no, not really. They recognize the filibuster is more useful to them in place because it blocks the bulk of an ambitious Democratic agenda, whereas most of what they want to do, to your point, are tax cuts and judicial appointments, which you can use either reconciliation or with a simple majority vote.
Yes. So we talked about this. So like the conversation with Rashad last night is touching on, it kind of intersects with what I'm talking about here. Because if it was correct, if it was true that Donald Trump has basically already ended our liberal democracy, that the guardrails are not there, that he's not constrained by the system. Say, for example, if we get to the midterms and he sees his voter machines, right? Like at that point, it is on like Donkey Kong and we're doing a civil war. That's what it's going to look like. I mean, just like similarly, I said that they wouldn't take it lying down if you started to ignore the Supreme Court or do what Rashad suggested, just like, arrest judges or whatever. The same thing is like on our side, we're not going to take that lying down either. I mean, like that is going to be a civil war at that point, right? But my whole thing is like, we are not there yet. And so the solutions that he was suggesting last night would be necessary if the system had already fell, but that's not what's happening here. And the reality is that Donald Trump has been a spectacular failure. He has been an incredibly weak president. He has never been in a weaker position than he is right now. So why are we doing this thing where it's like, we need to start getting creative and we need to start like thinking about maybe like working outside of the liberal rule set? Me and IRI were pushing back like, what are we talking about?
What is this?
Fucking Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill won by 15 points. Just do what they did. Mamdani, like came out of nowhere and made, not only won the mayorship, but now has like elevated his national profile to the point where I can see him being governor one day or senator one day, like just go, like do what they did, like borrow from their campaigns and focus on affordability and focus on Trump's corruption and focus on bringing prices down and these kinds of things. Why are we talking about like, we need to be prepared to, throw Rupert Murdoch in prison and then, dissolve the courts if they have a problem with that? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So again, I'm not proposing dissolving the courts. I definitely want to pack the fuck out of it and with all the binding codes of conduct that we talked about. So certainly I want to do things that are constitutionally permitted to change the composition and disposition of this court for, a more pro-democracy and quite frankly, pro-democrat posture. Right. So I'm unambiguous about that. But even as far as like the Rupert Murdoch thing, it is interesting as far as Fox News is concerned because, the Biden era FCC actually tabled certain investigations and probes into Fox News precisely because they had a very laissez-faire pro-First Amendment posture towards speech. And so they would table certain probes into like NBC and CBS, but also Fox News. They were fairly even-handed in that respect. Now we have a very different FCC under Brendan Carr who will resurrect probes and complaints against CBS and NBC and networks that Trump hates, but he'll keep the Fox ones buried, right? So they've certainly weaponized the FCC, and I've said this in multiple videos I've done. I'm not familiar enough with the law, and Pisco seemed skeptical that there was a colorable case to be made against Fox News, but I've heard other people say differently. But just you can imagine that right after they paid the biggest defamation settlement in American history, $787 million, you could conceive of a Biden administration, even if it didn't come from President Biden himself, but whoever his FCC chair was at the time, saying, you know what? They just paid the biggest defamation settlement in American history, signal boosting Trump's defamatory lies about the 2020 election. And that's not just like, it's not just like even run of the mill defamation. Like that does go to the heart of American democracy. So we're going to use our FCC powers to launch certain probes and inquiries and investigations, stuff like that. I think you could make a colorable case for the FCC to have investigated Fox News.
But you'd be but in that case, Jessiah, you would be looking for something to investigate. Instead of something landing on your desk and then investigating it, you would be, starting an investigation in search of a crime.
Well, no, I what I'm saying is, again, I'm not familiar with the law there, and maybe there's absolutely no colorable case to be made, but I can imagine a timeline in the multiverse, given that was, public news at the time. It's not like you had to go searching for it, right? It was a high profile story about that defamation settlement, that the FCC would be aware of that. And I mean, given the standards and practices and how they're supposed to regulate the conduct of, people of agencies and networks under the FCC's remit, I could see a case. What I'm saying is I would not immediately dismiss a case brought by the Biden FCC against Fox News following the Dominion lawsuit. I could easily conceive in the abstract, but maybe an FCC chair would be like, hey, Jessiah, I know that sounds like there's a relationship here, but in fact, no, there's nothing that Fox did under in the Dominion case that comes even close to an FCC violation. Then in that case, I'm not proposing that the FCC should go digging around for a separate issue after Dominion to punish Fox for Dominion. Does that make sense? I could see that the Dominion facts could potentially violate FCC guidance and FCC rules, but it never happened because the Biden FCC didn't want to touch Fox with a 10-foot pole. Like they actively dismissed probes against various networks, including Fox, because they had a very laissez-faire free speech posture.
I think this example gets at the core of the conflicts that you and I have had in the past, the arguments that you and I have had in the past, which is that you are more comfortable with
doing crazy shit.
Tactics. I mean, what you're describing, you're trying to dress it up and find some kind of like a legal rationale for it. But you are talking about launching an investigation in search of a crime. You are talking about politicizing the FCC. And before you say it, like, I understand like that's happening right now, but I want to make a different argument against it besides it being illiberal, because, I think the merits of that argument are good. You should just not generally do.
Can you clarify something for me though? Because you said that I would be weaponizing the FCC. Can you make how so?
Because Jessiah, you're not citing any statute that you think they violated. You're just assuming that they did something wrong, and therefore you're going to open the books and look into them. But what is that based on?
Well, wait a minute. I didn't call for them to open the books on Fox for the Dominion case. What I'm saying is, and I conceded this off the bat, that there may be no statute, which case I said repeatedly, and I'll say it again, if there was no violation of FCC rules by the Dominion conduct, then they shouldn't do anything. I'm saying, based on what we have seen from the Trump FCC about these like technical violations, like how, this network or that network may have technically violated FCC guidance, and they're using it to as a pretext to go after Jimmy Kimmel.
That's illiberal.
It's a fishing expedition.
Yes.
I'm saying if what Fox did with Dominion violated FCC guidance, then I do think it's fair game. Now,
well, of course.
If instead what they're doing is, we don't like what Fox did during Dominion and we can't get them on the facts of Dominion, so we need to go hunting for something else to hit them with to punish them for Dominion, I don't support that. That, I agree, would be an illiberal fishing expedition. But I do not agree that if, and that's the key word, if, that during the course of the Dominion case, Fox breached FCC guidance or FCC standards and practices, whatever it is, that the FCC probing that, I don't concede at all that that's illiberal or weaponization of the FCC.
But again,
do you agree or disagree?
But again, if that's the framing, then I don't disagree with that. Like if we lived in one of the universes in the multiverse where,
hell yeah,
because of this trial and because of information that came out during the trial, or the trial that it was eventually settled, the lawsuit with Dominion thing. Like if we live in the infinite multiverse where the Biden FCC at the time became privy to information that implied some
trials because you got Hutch. I didn't even do my trials. Fuck trials.
Violation.
I'm waiting for them to rework that system.
Of a regulation or violation of the law or whatever. Then obviously that would be justified. But what I would not co-sign is being like, this case against Dominion sure does seem to show like some real fuckery from Fox News. Let's take a look at their books. But that's not what I'm advocating for. But if you're looking for a crime, that would be illiberal. But I want to make a different argument. I think a lot of the dialogue these days is about tit for tat. And so it's like, well, Donald Trump is doing it to us. So like, we have to let them know that, we're going to fight back and whatever. And I'm not saying this is what you're saying. I think this is really kind of short-sighted and misguided and wrong, because when you look at what Donald Trump is doing right now with his FCC, they're losing that in the culture. They're losing that fight in the culture. They're losing that fight politically. They are paying a price for this overreach, for this corruption. Like, why do you think the Texas Senate is in play in 2026? Like, why do you think we are massacring?
Well, because they gerrymandered the fuck out of it, right?
This Republican Party right now, like all over the country. It's all death by 1,000 cuts. Like, the public has lost confidence in this administration. They view this administration as corrupt about the Epstein stuff.
Only because the economy is not good right now, though. There's a world where somehow the economy is actually turning out okay, and all of the American public, or enough of them, signs off on this, that we don't get any huge changes in House allotment or anything,
They see them trying to initiate a grand jury charges against Comey and
senators aren't. Oh wait, did he say the Texas Senate is in play? Do we feel like that's the case right now? Is that possible? I haven't heard that. That might be true. I just haven't heard it.
To James and failing. They say, there was just announced that Jeanine Pirro today is abandoning her efforts to try to find
against
some crime
the seditious six.
Right. So like all of that adds up. All of this, the public is like, not everybody is super engaged
one hatch key
to know about all this stuff happening, but all of it is hurting this administration. It's not helping them. And so you can argue that there's short-term gain for them being politically corrupt and weaponizing their agencies to go after political enemies.
Beards?
I can understand the impulse to like want justice for that, or want retribution, or want some kind of like balancing kind of action from Democrats. But I'm just cautioning people to pause for a minute and just like look at this administration and ask, like, where is it getting them? Like, are they actually benefiting from this stuff? I don't want to emulate that. Like, I don't want Gavin Newsom to be a year in his presidency in, we get to like 2030. And, he's tried and failed like 5 times to get his AG to go after this person or that person or this person or that person. That's why I think it's important to preserve the independent nature of the DOJ and our agencies. We should not weaponize and politicize our agencies. It will not help us in the long run. It might give us short-term catharsis, but the tit-for-tat stuff, it's only going to hasten the demise of the republic and put us on a fast track to actual civil war, and it's going to hurt us politically. Donald Trump is about to start speaking in the... Oh, wait, no, he's not. Never mind. They're doing a sizzle.
I was about to say, I think he starts at 9 o'clock.
Little bro, I'm just saying. No, I'm just kidding.
Invited into the chamber yet?
They're walking in slowly now. But like, do you understand my counter argument to the tit for tat thing? Like, do you understand like where I'm going for? Like, why I get very kind of gun shy about Gavin Newsom running on a platform of I'm going to direct AG to investigate Donald Trump?
Yeah, of course I do. You don't think it's necessary. You think that there's a risk of greater retaliation, that it would like a tit for tat would just lead to
I think it will hurt us.
A race to the bottom.
I think it will hurt. I think it will hurt us politically. It's not a question of if, it will hurt us politically if we do that.
Yeah, I'm not sold on that yet. I think it depends much on what the tit for tat would entail and what the campaign would look like. I agree with you that certain things like the textbook example that we used to talk about if Joe Manchin doesn't agree to a certain thing, I'm going to have the DOJ investigate his daughter. Like, yeah, I think that would be just politically disastrous. But
tit for tat within a liberal framework is good. Like, tit for tat means redistricting in California and redistricting in Virginia. I think not.
And it does mean prosecuting lawless behavior and stuff like that. So yeah, and anti-corruption measures and things of that nature. So again, I think it depends on precisely what is being discussed. So I understand your concern, and I've always understood your concern, and I do agree that it's a huge risk at a minimum. I still broadly support tit for tat of a certain type because I do think it's necessary. I think that the right in this country operates to the degree of ruthlessness that it does.
What would be other examples of tit for tat that you want to see? And I'll probably agree with you on a lot of these, right?
Yeah. You gave the example, gerrymandering in the absence of a national gerrymandering ban. That's one example.
I think we should go beyond. We should go beyond tit for tat with the gerrymandering thing. Like, I think we should ruthlessly gerrymander and get like 10 extra seats if we can do that, because they had an opportunity to codify a ban on partisan gerrymandering. They didn't want to do that. They picked a fight. And so I think we have a moral obligation to like fight that fight as aggressively as possible. We should go beyond tit for tat on that respect, right?
Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's probably the only way to, again, like incentivize them to come to the table to back a national gerrymandering ban. Again, expanding the courts as an example. I do think, again, public, relentless investigations into not just Trump, but Trump's family, prime time, televised, none of this behind the scenes shit. I'm looking forward to that. And then, yeah, I do think prosecuting members of the Trump administration, once the Trump administration is over, for corruption.
That shouldn't come from, I'm saying that should not come from a political party. That should come from prosecutors. That should come from the attorney general.
Yeah, but I mean, like I would argue that's a political process, because you would either openly campaign on accountability or expressly campaign on appointing a.
You get 100K easy on which thing I could run. I still have a bunch of the snitch scanners. I don't know what events are coming up.
An attorney general who would pursue such an agenda. So you'd either, as we talked about before, you would either be very open about it, very publicly, supporting prosecutions, or you would keep your mouth shut, but knowingly pick a person in a political process that you would expect would do the things that I'm talking about. So I do think it's, that's what I said. It just depends on how you package it, depends on how you go about it. But I do think that sort of tit for tat is necessary. Let me put it like this. If Trump pardons everybody out the door, which I think that's extremely likely, I would be shocked if he didn't. Although, he didn't pardon himself on the way out the door in term one. So he was surprisingly restrained. He pardoned like Manafort and a bunch of others. But I imagine, the incentives are much more different, or much more supporting of a mass pardon. I think we'll be in deep shit. If that's the case, because all that does is set the standard at that point, because you can't really do anything about a pardon. The only thing I can think of that you could do about pardon are two options. You could maybe get a constitutional amendment, maybe, but for all the reasons I just explained, I think that would be a challenge, because you would need supermajorities in both chambers and then 3/4 of the states to ratify, and I'm not sure we could even get those margins to curb a corrupt pardon tool.
I mean, it might take 40 years, Jessiah. That's the point.
Yeah,
it might take 40 years. It might take 50 years. It might take 100 years, right?
Yeah, so there's that, and then maybe the only other thing you could do is, again, by packing the court with non-conservative justices, that if there's any sort of legal challenges to Trump pardoning himself or others, that they would invalidate the pardon. Those are the only workarounds. Like that, the pardon is kind of a skeleton key, right, to lawlessness, and you combine that with presidential immunity. It's basically a get out of jail free card, right? And I think if he invokes that, and there's no meaningful way to address it, like there's no punishment, there's no accountability for him or his family or the people he pardons in his administration on his way out the door. When I say that we're in deep shit, I think that at that point the race to the bottom will continue to accelerate. accelerate, because that sends a signal to other corrupt politicians, particularly corrupt Republicans, that all you have to do between presidential immunity and pardons is just get to the damn office in the first place. And then for 4 to 8 years, man, they can go ham. They can have meme coins, shit coins, stable coins, deals with other countries, and between presidential immunity and the pardon tool, they can get away with fucking murder,
Okay, so what happens then? I mean, like, what are you proposing something if he pardons everybody? Or
Hell yeah, he is.
Short of, that's what I'm saying. I don't know where we go from there, and that's increasingly likely, because again, if he pardons everybody, there's no way to criminally prosecute them for the behavior he pardoned them for.
That might happen.
And no, of course, Jesus, I think that's increasingly likely, and that's why I can't speak for Stephen or Pisco or Rashad or other people, but I can tell you that is part of the reason why I'm so cynical, because I don't know how this country moves on from that, because it's not just that Trump would get away with murder. It's again what it incentivizes for future Republicans.
I mean, I think, listen, we need to be comfortable not knowing what the future holds.
No,
we need to be comfortable being, knowing that there are potentially dark paths ahead. But I think it's really important that we stay in the present and make as good a decisions as we possibly can in the moment. And if we start making decisions that I consider to be bad, or I'm defining bad in this respect as illiberal, I think those are bad decisions. Those bad decisions will pile up, and then continue to pile up, and eventually I think the whole house of cards comes crashing down. So like I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it is protecting us against my worst case scenario if we start to go down this like illiberal path. But I'm also saying that, recognizing that there may come a day where all bets are off and it's on like Donkey Kong and we're doing a civil war. I mean, I would never tell you like just accept the if we were really sliding towards a fascist takeover, if he seizes voter machines, or if he tries to dissolve the Congress, it does a military coup. That's a really tough situation. Do I immigrate? Do I Minecraft myself? Do I take out my Colt Anaconda 44 and we're in a different kind of situation there. But I think at every step of the way we need to stay present and make good decisions. And generally speaking, Donald Trump has personally enriched himself, no doubt, through this insane government corruption, especially with like the meme coin and everything.
$1 to $5 billion in just 1 year.
In my mind, I am preparing myself for the possibility that he never faces accountability for that. He may die a rich man, having never seen the inside of a prison cell. That's possible.
I guess I'm with you. It's not just possible. I would say at this point, if you held that anaconda to my temple and forced me to bet, I would bet that on balance of probability it's likely to happen. But the thing is, as much as that would sting, that's the thing. As much as that would sting on the merits of just Trump alone, I think that there's that second part which automatically entails, which is if Trump gets away with it, I think it automatically triggers the second thing, which is it then sends the most definitive signal out there to other corrupt grifters.
I get it.
And either party.
Not ideal.
Like basically, it is a necessary condition, I think, for the Republic to be in any sort of healthy state for Trump and his family and his allies to face some level of accountability, not just losing elections, right? But after they leave office, some sort of accountability by way of the law. Otherwise, I think we are on the decline, and I don't see a way to correct that. I don't see a timeline where Trump gets away with it and the Republic, the country gets better.
Well, listen, it's one day at a time, brother. No one can tell you exactly what is going to happen, and if that day comes, and we'll take that challenge in stride. And I think Donald Trump represents a pretty unique challenge. This is definitely a challenging moment for our republic, but I look back at the last 250 years of history. This is not the first challenge that we faced, and on balance, we are heading in a direction that I would say looks like progress. There were a lot of people that faced no accountability for their traitorous, treasonous actions after, the Civil War. And now I have an interracial relationship and there's no laws against it, right? Like, they're still racist, but they, mostly lost. Like, they very overwhelmingly lost. I mean, we have fucking Bad Bunny doing Super Bowl halftime shows, right? Like, there's remnants of the Confederacy, and there's lessons that should be learned from the Confederacy, I think. But the moment that we're in right now, I think, is like we still have about fucking 20 to 50 to maybe even like 300 steps before we're in a situation where we're in a civil war, and then we have to maybe like forego the Constitution in some cases, right?
Yeah, well, but that's part of the problem too. Is like I take your point about the Confederacy, and a more modern example I think is the pardon of Nixon, and I think historians, maybe not so much with Reconstruction. I mean, Reconstruction was kind of aborted, right? It effectively was DOA after President Lincoln was assassinated because his successors really didn't carry it through.
Yep.
And even the 14th Amendment disqualifications, like Congress eventually, I think just a few years later, passed like a mass pardon allowing, ex-Confederates who were disqualified under the 14th Amendment to resume office. And so I think because there wasn't like this systemic program to, eliminate the legacy of the Confederacy, that had massive negative implications down the road. It was kind of like a half measure. Remember Breaking Bad where Jonathan Banks' character, why am I blanking on his name? The old bald guy, Mike, where Mike was like, how he chose the half, where he chose the half measure. And then the same thing with like President Ford's pardon, President Nixon, really bad. There are a lot of, Yeah. I mean, I think in hindsight, like there was a time, I think, I don't know what the polling is, I can't remember, but I think eventually the polling became popular for Ford's pardon of Nixon, but now it's regressed again. The American people look back on it like, that was probably a bad message to send. And so it's like, then you look at Brazil and South Korea, two very recent examples of what they did to their insurrectionist wannabe dictator dipshits, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. And again, going back to your question of, you asked me, do you see why I have a healthy fear of the tit for tat? And I told you I do. Given what we discussed, do you understand why others like myself have, see the tit for tat in some form as absolutely necessary despite the risk? Like, do you see the flip side to that?
I understand your sense of urgency. I think in your mind, you think that by doing something like having Newsom run explicitly on a platform of investigating Trump, you think this is in service to a larger project of preserving liberalism in your own way, ironically. But it's my view that I think you're misguided. I just disagree with you. I think that these actions would only further erode the guardrails and put us even more down that path. That's the big difference of opinion that we have. And I don't think we can reconcile that, but I'm good with you having a different belief on this. Like, I apologize if sometimes the banter maybe goes a little too far. And so I don't want you to get the sense that,
it just didn't read it. It just didn't read as banter. Like I said, I accept your apology. I took it at face value just based on, many comments that you said. And I also wasn't looking at your face when you were talking about it.
I feel so bad for Hutch. I feel like it feels like he's stepping on so many people's toes lately. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I just don't hear Jessiah interact with him too much now since he's not on the live and learn. So it's hard to say.
Listening to your audio, it seemed like it was, it seemed like it was genuinely condescending. And so if it was banter, if it was pure banter.
Sometimes I wonder a little bit, it's hard to know for sure, but like I wonder if our gaming background plays into that at all. Because was Hutch ever, I'm not making accusations, no, never mind, because he played FPS. There were slurs associated with that game, but I'm sure he would never went down that road. But I'm sure he's heard and said a lot of rough stuff coming from that background. And then same thing with me in pro gaming, like it's just like a really rough world. Whereas Jessiah seems like he comes from an incredibly normal, ordinary world of normal, ordinary people that aren't like going crazy against each other online. So I wonder if he just interprets it a lot more harshly than maybe Hutch would imagine he would. I guess, maybe, I don't know.
No, I've been known to condescend from time to time. Yes. But I think, I don't know, in my opinion, it kind of goes both ways. Like, but I choose not to take that. For me, that's not off limits. And, where I guess this is us, it's just like establishing boundaries, right? But
well, no, I mean, it could be. I think part of the problem is maybe it's because I don't think I condescend you. I think that, you are certainly I feel you're much more aggressive with me than I am with you. But I also feel that way about a lot of people. And I usually like to keep my powder dry, and it could be just because I like to go harder on the right than the left. And maybe that just needs to be part of it. And, I just need to be willing to respond.
I'm staying for response to the State of the Union. The VA governor's doing it. The responses are so boring. Maybe I will. We'll see.
The kind in you. If I think you're condescending me, then I just fire back on those terms. So it's just, we talked about asymmetry earlier. I don't want there to be an asymmetry in our relationship. If you condescend me, I have the right to condescend you. And if you don't want that, then don't condescend me. Does that make sense?
I 100% think that you should respond in kind if you feel that I've unreasonably condescended you. And
perfect.
Like I felt like the dynamic that I have with like the pod, not just the old cast, the new cast too. Mm-hmm. It's like, we do, kind of full send. And that is part of the content, part of the appeal. And I would never tell you guys not to like full send on me or go hard on me. And we can just hash it out that way. And
yeah, I want to be clear. I don't think you've ever imposed that on us. And I can't speak for anybody else. You've never said or suggested to me that I can't go hard in the paint on you. But I know it bothers you because you've said as much when you feel that you're being misrepresented or strawmanned or taken in bad faith, or somebody has a reductive, view of your beliefs. And I feel the same way. And so, like I said, just for me, it's about symmetry. If you don't want that done to you, don't do it to me. But if you're prepared to have it done to you, then go right ahead. I like having that sort of, even keel balance. And, but no, listen, I accept the apology. It was done and over with as soon as you clarified. So we're good. And I think the conversation has been much more productive since then. And I'm not even looking at the screen. So you tell me when Trump shows up.
He's coming soon. It's real soon. It's about 10 minutes. But the VP's there, the House Speaker's there. So I assume he's going to start walking in soon.
Yeah, he's going to do his little tour there. It takes like 40 minutes, it seems like, to get to the lectern. But as far as the one thing that, again, I came in here to ask you about, as far as like the Trump thing, and you did address it, but I didn't get a chance to respond as far as like Trump being weak. And again, we touched on this earlier, but I didn't get a chance to really dive deep because of time constraints. I think the disconnect for me, I can't speak for anybody else, is while I agree with you that Trump is more of a paper tiger than he wants you to believe, and I certainly agree with you too, that we have to be careful about how we speak of Trump or the MAGA movement because he is a fascist and an authoritarian. What does he want? He does not want to be mocked, and he wants to be treated not just as the most powerful person in the room, but truly invincible. I take your point entirely there. And certainly in 2025 and 2026, Democrats have been overperforming and Republicans have been losing elections very predictably. And I also agree with you that all else being equal, he is facing a shellacking in November. Now, I guess I'm too much of a cynic to be as confident as you are because, we're still waiting to hear about Florida gerrymandering. Virginia gerrymandering is kind of in limbo now because a court struck it down.
We're going to win that war, though. It looks like, I don't know, the pollsters that I follow seem to think that we're going to come out the better of it.
Yeah, no, I think all else being equal, that's true. But then the other thing is, and again, maybe Pisco could weigh in on this, but I think the Supreme Court the United States Supreme Court is about to make a ruling on what's left of the Voting Rights Act and stuff. So all of that. So I all of that is to say, I would still bet on us retaking the House. I just don't know why, but by what margin, right? The pollsters that I've seen, for example, I think I've even seen Locke just say something like that we can't bank on the sort of 2018 wave that we saw, that, the margins are still not quite there yet, that it seems unlikely that we'll get 40 seats, right? So it seems more than likely that we'll retake the House. We don't know by what margin. The Senate is increasingly in play, but still slightly favored towards the Republicans. So take all of that at face value. But the thing, I guess the disconnect here is Trump is simultaneously weaker than he wants you to believe, but he's still very powerful. He is the most powerful man in the world. And he can, as I think Pisco explained.
You got to set up a talk with Hutch to hash out your disagreements. Hutch keeps strawmanning your position. I don't know if he's strawmanning it. I think I said everything I needed to say earlier. Like I think that he just doesn't think we're as far gone as I feel like we are, and he feels like really strong electoral victories will be enough for, I guess, like writing the record or whatever the fuck. I don't know. Like that if we win hardcore electorally coming up, that's going to be good enough. I would say the same if it was like we had like 75 seats in the Senate and like 2/3 of the House, and the next president was like 70% of the popular vote went to a dumb thing. I'd be like, okay, the American people woke up and realized. But I don't think that we managed to barely squeak by in another election and we've got a divided Senate or something so we can block some. I don't think that's enough.
It was either yesterday or in a previous conversation you all had, I thought it was yesterday, that the presidency is the most powerful of the branches in terms of the practical day-to-day implications, in terms of agility, in terms of day-to-day reach, right? So he has a lot of power. Plus, he currently does control both chambers of Congress, and though he's not able to offer much by way of an affirmative, productive legislative agenda, he can stop anything the Democrats want to do for all intents and purposes, right? Like there are no real investigations with any sort of teeth into his corruption or anything else. So, and then, of course, you get to the Supreme Court, and we don't need to relitigate that. I think in some ways it's the most powerful of the branches, and he's got a 6-3 conservative supermajority. Yes, the tariff decision was great, but it was also kind of doing him a political favor, right? Because you could make the case that the court was trying to save him politically from himself and get rid of the tariffs. So there was a silver lining there for Trump. He just chose not to take it. And for the most part, the court has ruled in his favor. And so I think the disconnect is I think sometimes maybe your analysis does not offer or does not evaluate the areas where Trump is strong and powerful and dangerous. Right? Well, I mean, sometimes I get the impression that when you say he's weak, it comes off like maybe you think he's impotent. Hey, and I think there's a way for both of these things to be true, that he is as weak as you say, but also incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous in other ways that have people terrified. We're only 1 year in.
I think there's a fundamental difference in terms of how we just think about these things. I'm much more, I would say, I don't think about like the fact that he's president for the next 3 years. We can't really do anything about that. That was baked in November of 2024. As soon as it became clear that he was going to be the president, that was it. I mean, I accepted it that night. I mean, I got to a place of like, I wasn't happy, but I got to a place of acceptance about it that night. And so I think about things in terms of not about like, just me in my life, just like personally in my life. I used to spend a lot of time thinking about the worst case scenario that could play out in my life. And you're this like booming content creator. And so I know you know what it's like to be in a really good situation, but you're just consumed with like, oh my God, what if it gets really bad? Like, I'm sure you've had that thought like 1,000 times. And
that's my life, bro.
Right. So like, I know so I know what that's like too. I know exactly what that feeling is like. And I know what it's like to worry about that in terms of like my own life and my own like mental health or my own career path or my relationship or whatever. And I'm at a point in my life now where I really don't operate that way anymore. And so all I'm thinking about is like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, what's literally the next thing that we can do to check this president? And so I've been looking at special elections in this way. It's just like little by little, like inch by inch, every seat matters, every win matters. I'm thinking about the off-cycle election in November. That felt fucking euphoric. That was like such a shot in the arm. I felt so much better about the state of things in this country after that night. And I'm thinking about the midterms. And so I'm just focusing on what can we do now to make this better? And what we can do is win a mandate from the public to check this administration. And I think we're going to do that. I think we're going to take back the House. And I think we're going to have fucking daily subcommittee hearings, public hearings, grilling this administration and further hobbling them and blocking their ability to do bad legislation like the One Big Beautiful Bill. And, I'm not going to make any predictions for 2028 yet, but I feel pretty good about it right now. And I think that we're on, I just feel so much better about the situation. Fully acknowledging, by the way, he's hurting people. He's doing real harm. And so I think about that too. Like, I think about people that have been really harmed. But I mean, like, I won't get into specific details, but bro, this, like, concerns about this administration definitely directly impacts me and the people that I love and the people that I care about. And there's times when I'm fucking furious about that. And maybe I don't talk about that enough, and so it gives me people like the wrong impression of maybe people think I'm being too cavalier and too dismissive of the danger that he poses, but I don't. I mean, I live that stress, and I live that, and I'm angry for the way that he's hurting people that I love and their family, and these kinds of things. And so I don't know if that explains my process, but I'm just thinking.
No,
about,
it does. It does. Like I said, I think that's probably the disconnect for me. Again, I can't speak for anybody else. Like Trump is weak, yes, but he's also powerful, yes. Like he's not just weak, and he's not just powerful. He's
weaker than Biden. He's weaker than Biden was at this point in his term, like unquestionably weaker, way weaker. And yet the way that he's talked about is that he's like somehow strong in a way that Biden wasn't. And I
think he is. I think he is in the sense that, and I mean, I certainly agree with you that in a lot of ways he's weaker than Biden. I think where Trump projects strength and why this is reflected in the polls and why the vast majority of Americans have this impression, like there was a polling about this Democratic Party, strong, effective, all these things, and the Republican parties, by double digits leading the Democrats in strong and effective, even though they're also seen as more radical and all these things, is because there is a ruthlessness and a cruelty to Trump and the Republicans that Biden and the Democrats did not. So I agree with you that it's almost like, who was I'm trying to think of like a good Game of Thrones metaphor, but one's not jumping to mind immediately, but cruelty and a willingness to use your waning power can look stronger than someone who is more powerful but exercises restraint.
Lord of the Rings, makes any sense. Lord of the Rings, the guy that's eating the grapes. That guy.
Tom Bombadil or whatever. That might be it. I don't know. But I think that's what it is. But anyway, I know he's about to speak soon. But again, appreciate the conversation. Appreciate you clarifying as far as like the Trump weakness stuff. And yeah, we're good, buddy.
I appreciate you coming in and just like I mean it. I appreciate you coming in and being honest with me about that stuff. I don't mind if you use your big voice with me. I do apologize. I really do apologize. I feel bad that I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. Like I like you a lot, bro. I want to be friends with you.
Of course. Yeah, likewise. And the friendship's not in jeopardy.
I want it to go for years, man. I want you and I to still be talking like 10 years from now.
I don't understand how they're so triggered with each other. Or I guess Jesiah's triggered? I don't know.
20 years from now, okay?
100%. We're good.
And there's not a lot of people I just want you to know, I don't like most people, okay? Like I'm selective about like who I want to be friends with.
I know, and you were very, very transparent about that when we first talked about Live and Learn. And the last thing I'll say is this, again, you don't have to publicly respond, but what I said in that text, to be thinking about it, because I think that would be very relevant. Yeah, you just think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Whoa, wait, what? Wait. Was that red? Do we know what that text is? How are you not noticing what's happening? Jesiah's attacking Hutch because of Pisco. He's trying to throw it back at him using the same words Hutch used on Pisco. No, I don't think so. Stop.
And the last thing I'll say is this. Again, you don't have to publicly respond, but what I said in that text, be thinking about it, because I think that would be very relevant. Yeah, you just think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, buddy.
All right, man.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye-bye.
See you, buddy. Bye.